And welcome to today's meeting of the Scrutiny Commission. As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live to the public, so members, please use your microphones when speaking. I've received apologies from Mr. Piper and Dr. North, who will be subbing on his behalf. So welcome to Dr. North. Congratulations on your election and welcome to your first meeting, I believe. So welcome. And I've also just last minute received apologies from Mr. Bulls. Okay, item 1, minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of March, pages 3 to 14. I move that these are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is that agreed? Item 2, minutes of the special meeting held on the 18th of March, pages 15 to 16. I move that these are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is that agreed? Okay, on to item 3, question time. I've now received no questions from the public. Item 4, questions asked by members under Standing Order 7. I've received no such questions. Item 5, urgent items. I have no urgent items today. Item 6, declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Do any members have any other interests they wish to declare? No, thank you.
I'll need to declare now that I'm now the Deputy Leader at Harbour District Council with responsibility for economic development, culture and tourism, which obviously has a bearing on the place item. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll note them. And item 7, declarations of the party whip. Do members wish to declare the party whip? Okay, item 8, presentation of petitions. I've received no petitions. So we'll move on to the first substantive item, which is item 9, the Leicester and Leicestershire Business Skills Partnership, pages 7 to 24. Zafar, the Assistant Chief Executive, will introduce this item, supported by Sarah Rudkin, the Economic Growth Team Leader. Unfortunately, Peter Chandler, Head of Economic Regeneration at Leicester City Council, is unable to attend. I'll welcome Mr. Harrison, the leader, has been invited for this item, so welcome, Mr. Harrison. So Zafar, if you'd like to present, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The report sets out an overview of the work of the Business and Skills Partnership. By way of a refresher or reminder, if you look at paragraph 4 there, in terms of the background, the Leicester and Leicestershire Economic Partnership, the LEP, was set up some years ago, and then the government decided by way of direction that they'd pass over those functions to the two upper tier local authorities. So that's Leicester City Council and Leicestershire County Council. So that decision was made in the spring budget of 2023 and then the actual arrangements took place in April 2024. And then since then we've been working with the City Council to set up some transitional arrangements in order to move over practical issues such as HR, legal, finance, contractual, because there's 2P implications, etc. And at the same time wind down the LEP limited company, because it was a separate company and separate entity. So that's what's happened in the last year and a bit. And then if you look at the governance arrangements on paragraph 9 onwards, what we've established now is an executive group which comprises of the upper tier local authorities chief officers, together with the leader and Sir Peter Salisbury from the City Council. Rutland is also attends, but also as an observer, because what we're trying to do is reflect the functional economic area, which is obviously Leicester and Leicestershire and Rutland, because I think we've got some unity and strength there in terms of supporting businesses, skills, jobs, etc. Underneath that executive, there is a business board. The business board is an advisory board to the executive. Again, if you look at the appendix, which is set out on page 23, it sets out the membership of the business board. The chair is Andy Reid as an independent chair, and then the membership is drawn from private sector businesses, some large businesses. There you can see Caterpillar, Everard's, Myra, but also smaller businesses as well, to reflect the diversity of the local business community, together with our sector partners from Voluntary Action, Leicestershire, and the universities and the colleges. There's also representative bodies as well, such as the IO, the Institute of Directors, and the Chambers of Commerce as well. So we've got a broad mix of those members. We are recruiting an additional 5 members as well to reflect manufacturing, logistics, and the rural economy as well. So we've got a good mix across different industries and different businesses. And as I said, their role is primarily to advise the board. The actual work program then is split into three areas: business and innovation, jobs and skills, and place marketing. In terms of place marketing and inward investment and tourism, that links to paper 10 on the agenda here today. So you'll receive a separate presentation focusing mainly on tourism, but it also reflects on inward investment and jobs created and income generated for the functional economic area. So that's how the two reports link in together. For each one of those 3 legs, so to speak, there's a lead agency. So on business and innovation, the universities are mainly leading on that, and there's a work program underneath that. Place marketing we'll cover later on the agenda, and jobs and skills, it's split into 2 areas. One area is around careers advice. So the work we're doing with colleges and schools, again, that's led by the city. And then there's also some economic business advice, which is with a whole range of advice. People ring in to our advisors, joint advisors with the city, and they provide guidance, advice, support to businesses. And within that, we're also supporting a program called Connect to Work and Get Britain Working, which is aiming for those people on long term, whether it's sickness or for other reasons they're facing difficulties getting work. In terms of how this is funded, it's largely funded through reserves from the LEP. As the LEP closed down, its revenue and its capital were transferred over to the City Council, who's accountable body for both the LEP and then accountable body for the new arrangements. So it is fully funded through a combination of reserves that have transferred over, and those also external grants. So some of the programs, such as the Careers Hub and the Connect to Work and the Growth Hub, are all fully funded. So there's no real cost to the county council. In fact, there's a benefit to the county council and also Rutland as well from that investment and ultimately it should create job skills and boost the local economy for the whole of our residents and our businesses. So that's broadly how the governance arrangements fit together, and an overview of how we're working collaboratively across the system.
Thanks, Safa. Mr. Harrison, do you have anything to say at the moment?
Sorry, thank you. Well, obviously to you and all the members, this report highlights the opportunity to create a stronger partnership between the council and local business communities to drive investment, jobs, long-term economic growth. Partnership working provides an opportunity for aligning public sector leadership with private sector insight, ensuring decisions about skills, employment and economic priorities are informed by those who are actively investing, employing and growing in our area. From the council's perspective, this is about creating the right conditions for investment. This means providing provision of clarity, leadership, joined up decision making and confidence to businesses, investors, that Leicestershire is open for growth. The governance arrangement set out in the report reflects my commitment to collaborative working at scale, maximising external investment opportunities, whilst ensuring that growth translates into tangible benefits for the residents and the benefits through better jobs, skills development and sustainable local economies. Thank you.
Thank you. And I suppose just one question from me to you before I open it up. I think across all of today's reports, governance repeatedly depends on partnership working, shared leadership and reputational trust. So just really how are you getting assurance that the council is safeguarded against those reputational risks in practice where we're relying on partners to deliver what we need as well. So I suppose,
Indeed.
how are you doing?
The board is set up, and sitting above that is Peter and myself. So we're the two who vote, who have to agree on how we're going to progress. So we have oversight of what's happening, and we can then make decisions on the evidence presented correctly, how we can perceive we can move forward. Obviously, we've got advisors and officers with us as well to support us if we need further background or more intelligence. So it's done quite properly and appropriately. And I think both of us have our own vested interests, but our interests are common because we just want to see growth happen, because Leicestershire will develop as we go through this, hopefully.
Thank you. Any questions from members? Mr. Innes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested in how this links into other organisations that are set up through the county. So, for example, we have Melton Bid. I think there's a small towns community, etc. Does this link into those, or are they operating in separate parts or whatever?
Sorry.
Leader, can you turn your microphone off, please?
Yeah. They're very specific in terms of their play space, and obviously, say something like the bid, because there's a bid in the city as well. There's bids across the county, and obviously the businesses that pay that additional levy, or however you wish to describe it, are requesting specific things. Often they're more, I would probably say, operational. They're interested in antisocial behaviour, empty shops, street drinking, festivals. That level of detail are very specific to that town centre or to the businesses within there. This is more strategic, and also, as I've alluded to in the report, this is a vehicle for the government to pass over responsibilities and funding to us. So we some of those projects are significant. The Get Britain Working, for example, is several millions of pounds, and also they are evidence based and slightly different arrangements, because we have to account for those funding. Plus, we some of them are conditional. We need to demonstrate we get so many people back into work. So they are complementary, but I would say they're operating at different levels. Having said all of that, we'd have to review all of this as part of the local government review organisation, because there's not just those groups. There's a rural agenda as well. There's also Market Towns Group. Myself, I'm meeting with Ed de Coverley from Elton Council, and we've tasked Sarah's team with the task of basically going through all the different groups that exist, working out the governance arrangements, and then mapping them, and then bringing it back to the executive group of chief executives across the 10 chief executives, to basically then realign it.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think there's a lot of data, information, local knowledge, etc., that we need to, in all of these groups, and it's not just BID, but other ones, that we need to feed up and down and make sure these groups are talking to each other. I know there's a lot of groups. I'm finding out there's quite a few, and I think it's important that we develop those links. So thanks for your answer. Thank you.
Dr. Bloxham.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, first, I was interested to read on page 19, it just sort of mentions quite briefly enterprise zones. Back in the past, or in China today, back in the 80s, Thatcher, they had fewer regulations and lower taxes and things. Is that the sort of thing we have in ours? Are they quite ambitious in that way, or are they more descriptive, that they're just sort of areas where we have a lot of enterprise happening? And the second question, I'll just get them both out of the way, if that's okay. It talks about a lot about aims and roles and structures, but I just wonder, what are the metrics we're going to use to measure how effective this is in the future? Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of that first question, good question. It is a mixture. The enterprise zones, we've got well, there's 3 operating across LLR, but certainly the ones that we're directly involved with is the university one, the Loughborough University one, and then there's obviously the space park within the city as well. And we work extensively with both Charnwood Borough Council and Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council on the enterprise zones. They are a physical place where businesses can locate, but also they do generate jobs, skills, wealth in themselves. And there's quite a detailed evidence report of what they're achieving, because clearly we need to demonstrate metrics, we need to demonstrate outputs, we need to demonstrate outcomes. And that links into your second question. I can bring back, I mean, at the you know, if the Commission requires it, a more detailed breakdown of all the different measures, key performance indicators, targets, in the same way we've done with the place marketing report. So we do have that level of detail, so that we can benchmark ourselves with our near neighbours.
Thank you. Do you want that just via email, or do you want it to come back for a discussion as such? Because
I
it
think
seems
it
more
could-
information.
It seems like it could be a good discussion if that stuff's already out there, and we can discuss how effective all this stuff is, because at the minute it's kind of quite airy, isn't it? On the enterprise zones, could I just, are there any plans to make any more enterprise zones in other parts of the county?
No, to be fair, it's all up for review and change, because it links to the regional changes that have taken place with mayoral combined authorities and possible strategic foundation strategic authorities. The more and more powers are being passed directly from central government to the mayoral model. So for our area, or the slightly wider area, if you look including the sort of what they call the Trent Arc, the Mansfield-Chesterfield area, we've got an investment zone in Chesterfield. We've then got the Freeport sort of straddling both areas, Leicestershire, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, and then we've got the enterprise zones within the city and county. There's no, as far as I'm aware, and I'm probably looking at Sarah, I've not read anything or nothing's come down the line of expanding that. I mean, what I suspect there'll be consolidation, because one of the changes around, for example, the Freeport is accountable body status is moving from Leicestershire County Council to East Midlands County Combined Authority, with immediate effect. So that takes place in April, or it should take place on Friday. So it seems more a concentration, and then linking that into, I would say, some form of regional spatial strategy or regional growth strategy. So I think more will happen on a regional level, or possibly a sub-regional level, rather than it being down to individual areas. So sorry, that was a long answer to Wishy's question. The should have been no.
Maybe it would be good for us to have a report. I know it's sort of early stages about the Foundation Strategic Authority, and we can draw this information into that and just have a bit of a wider discussion rather than just focusing on one bit, just a bit of a wider one. But I know that we've only done an expression of interest, haven't we, in the Foundation Street? So probably when the time's right, we can have a discussion, agenda planning of what we bring to a wider report about what's happening in the area, the region. That's okay. Okay, Mr. Mullaney.
Thank you, Chair. It was really just say, obviously, I'm glad in the report the emphasis on supporting the enterprise zones. We do have the Myra Technology Zone that's very near to my area in Hinckley. I've visited a number of times. It has a lot of groundbreaking, innovative work going on there, and as economically to be competitive, we need this more modern technology, innovative work. The better, the more we can do to support Myra, really the more positive, because I think they do bring a lot to the local economy.
Yeah, again, if you look on the terms of reference and the membership, Suzanne, there is a rep from Myra, Hariba Myra, on the business board.
Mr. King.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I think what's already been said about KPIs, I think this report is sadly lacking those, and you know, what difference is it making? And also, I am a little bit concerned, Chair, we all know that the direction of travel is government is going to transfer powers to whatever the new combined authority with the mayor will be once that's set up. So I'm a little concerned as to what that means, and because are we just looking back at what you've done rather than what's going to be coming forward? And I think we need to understand that as well as looking back. The only other concern I've got, the makeup of this board, and this is something I've been critical of before, it is dominated by big business, and the strength of Leicester and Leicestershire is small businesses, really small businesses, and we've only got one or two people on that board who have, I would say, with respect to them, that level of experience and know-how and knowledge, and I'm a little bit concerned. So I think we need to see, in my view, we need to see a bit more about actually what difference is this board and its strategy actually made to date. Where's the money being spent on what, and what's it actually delivered, and what difference has it made? Because I think previously when it was the LEP, there was a lot of criticism about what the LEP did or didn't do, and actually quite a lot of it made absolutely no difference whatsoever. And it did end up, investing in things and getting ripped off. So I'm a little bit concerned, and I think we do need to see a bit more meat on the bones and detail. And I'd agree, we should have a more detailed report coming back, but also looking forward as to what are the implications of LGR and what will it mean, because that's going to be really, really important we understand that. Thank you.
Mr. Harrison, did you want to come in there?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I absolutely share the concern of Councillor King. We set an initiative up here at County Hall where I had a meeting of businesses coming in. We obviously had, as he refers to, a huge international company, but we had lots of other people here, and the idea is to understand. Now, people say, well, you're just chatting away, but listening to the builders, when they get a document to complete, it's probably 2 or 3 inches. We're now looking at just one sheet of paper. Now, this is through talking, listening and understanding. And that's what we're trying to do with this business group. Understand where the problems are. Have we the power to help them? Can we do something about it? So this was one where we're involved with that. So we're able to deal with that. But it's again the exchange of other people around the table. And I can't remember, it was probably about 25 or 30 different people came along, and we had a breakfast and we chatted away and then got our sleeves rolled up. So it is having the time to talk and then understand how can we help. Are we just talking, or can we do things about it? Because that's what I really want to see, how we can help create. And talking of small businesses, well, all businesses start small normally and then grow. And so I'm really interested very, very much in how we can help Leicestershire business people where we could do something positively to help them. And that's by understanding. I can't help if I don't even know what they want. So we've got to understand what would help them. And so that's the evolution going on. And that's separate to this other organisation, because we're putting that in with LGR as part of our move forward and communications with businesses in Leicestershire. And then obviously we're doing a lot with parish councils as well. So it's all flow. If we don't talk, we don't know. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Poland?
Thank you very much. Paragraph 17 talks about the employment hub, which used to be previously delivered sub-regional, but now it's focused on the city. But it also says it's looking to expand it more widely across LLR. Really just trying to understand what the employment hub is, what does it do? And when we say it's focused on the city, do we mean it's focused on getting jobs, of the jobs in the city, and the people can be anywhere? Or is it focused on people living in the city and getting them jobs anywhere? Does that make sense?
Currently, as it stands, it is focused on city residents. That's the model. So We have worked in the county previously, but that was linked to European funding, and we managed to fund it through those means. So yeah, it's an aspiration to expand it out to the county, but we're just exploring how that could look. But currently as it stands, it focuses just on city residents.
Is it possible to get a bit more detail about what it actually does and how it can help county residents if rolled out?
Yeah, that's no problem. And I can look at the businesses that are involved. I mean, it does involve sort of pushing people through into apprenticeships and more vocational roles. But yeah, absolutely, I can arrange that. No problem.
Just on that point, did money go to districts for this? Was it funneled through districts in the county?
For the employment hub, the districts used some of their UK SBF recently to fund discrete areas. I think it was in Hinckley and Northwest, but I can find that, I can understand that a bit more. But we did do it across the county probably five years ago. But then it had to stop because the funding stopped.
Yeah, I thought districts have got, so I think Loughborough do one as well, don't they?
Yeah, Loughborough do a lot.
Yeah,
actually in Loughborough, but perhaps not widely in Charnwood. But yeah, no, I'll bring some more information, no problem.
Is there any other questions from members? Yeah, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair. It's not really a question, it's more of a comment, really. As Mr. Harrison said there, talking and listening is really, really important. It's something we should never fall shy of. But what we are in danger of becoming is another talking shop. I've run a business for over 25 years, successful business now. And basically, I measure myself on KPIs and outcomes and objectives. And this report does seem a little bit light in that. So I think when we're looking at the governance structure, that should be the end goal, not the talking and the listening. Talking and listening is all good, but we don't want to become another talking shop, and that was the LEP's failure.
I've just got one question about the funding. You did mention in there that you're just sort of hanging on by reserves, and we all know you can only spend reserves once and then they've disappeared. So going forward, how is this going to be funded? Because there's no funding coming from anywhere, is there?
I think we'll have to review the funding. I mean, this model guarantees funding to end of 2028, certainly the financial year 2028. But then we'll have to, as part of the LGR process, look at the whole of jobs, skills, worklessness agenda. Some of those programs will continue, but we're going to have to relook at the whole model, because we'll have to obviously clearly, under new arrangements, Rutland will be joining the functional economic area. There's a whole range of different, from joint working arrangements that we've got in place, joint appointments, core funding, general fund repurposed for the specific purpose. Because I think the key thing is, to some extent, we've got to grow the local economy. That's the way we're going to bring people into work. That's the way we're going to attract businesses. And through that, it's going to generate wealth collectively. So I think it is a concern, but I think as part of the new arrangements, there'll be conversations at that upper tier local authority between the three local authorities about the future direction we're looking at.
And do we have a date when Rutland are joining yet?
They've already got observer status. I think we're going to have those discussions, I suspect, later on in the summer, once we know what the direction is.
Mr. Poland.
Sorry, thanks. Just on sort of LGRs, slightly more expanded on that. Is this something that in other areas is done by a combined authority? And is that something, therefore, that would be likely in LLR if we ever get to the point where we have an elected mayor?
Some issues are done at scale. For example, planning, transport, highways. It depends on the level of ambition, and depends on what's in there. I suspect with something like this, it'll be a mixture, because I think it's similar to Mr. Innes raised around the local infrastructure around bids and market towns, etc. So I think that can only happen at place. That can only happen at the city or county or the district level or Rutland, because we know our areas, we know our patches, but it may be that what will happen regionally is they receive the funding, and in effect that's what's happened the Freeport, the funding arrangements, the governance and the accountable body arrangements have been pushed up to level, but that in many ways that's easier. It frees your hand from a lot of that governance to crack on with doing the work, which is clearly the main thing members have raised today.
Mr. Innes?
Yeah, just a thought. I was hearing on the radio today about a government initiative on younger people, because the unemployment rate for the young people is extremely high. Would this tie into this? Would this be able to support initiatives that we could look after our younger people? And
Yeah, certainly can under the employment and skills element to it. Currently, we do a lot of work with, we've got the careers hub, that's schools focused, but then there's also the kids that drop outside of that. So what we call NEET, not in education, employment and training. We've got now the Get LLR Working, Get Leicestershire and Rutland Working Plan, which is a framework. An element of that is NEET related, and there's work pushing forward on that. So yes, absolutely, it fits with this agenda and supporting those young people to then not become economically inactive if we can catch them early and pull them in and then move them into employment.
just to reiterate again, I think this is such an important area. I think we need a lot more detail on this just to understand what we're doing and how we could support as well.
Yeah, we can discuss this further when we have an next agenda planning about what detail we actually, because there's been quite a lot, it's gone quite wide, isn't it? I think we probably need to focus it a little bit, but we can have a discussion, then bring something back to the Commission at a later date. Okay, so if there's no more questions, the recommendation is that we note the annual update. And we'll move on to item 10, which is the place marketing Leicester and Leicestershire, pages 25 to 52. So Zephyr, you're remaining with us as well, and with Sarah. And we're also joined by Mike Denby. I think he's joining us online. Oh, I just presentation. Oh, right. I just saw you. You're actually here physically. Welcome. Director of Inward Investment and Place Marketing at Leicester City Council, who will provide a presentation that you're obviously going to load up now. So, Mr. Crook, you're also here. Welcome for this item as well. So, handing over to you first, Safa.
If I just do a short introduction, if I just cover the report, that provides an update on the actual achievements, and that should pick up some of the discussions previously about evidence base and exactly what we're doing and what difference are we making, which is clearly why we're here. So we'll be able to go through that on a geographical basis and also an industry basis as well, and hopefully that will satisfy members that there is quite a lot of substance there. How we work, again, it's similar to the previous report. This is a joint arrangement, so we work collaboratively with the city. We've got officers based here and also within the city with those joint arrangements. The focus is clearly on a number of areas. One is around tourism. It's secondly about investment in Leicester, Leicestershire specifically. So how do we attract businesses into, and then when they're here, when the businesses want to grow, how do we support them to grow? So that's the focus of the report. And then there's a wider promotion of Leicester and Leicestershire as a place as well. And there's various activities we undertake using social media, the website, attendance at events. So hopefully you'll find it informative, and we'll be able to pick up any questions or queries as part of Mike's presentation.
Thank you, Zafar. Thank you, Chair. I've prepared a presentation that just directly lists some key information from the report, just to make it a little bit easier to consume. In terms of recent figures, from a tourism perspective, the sector is growing. The city and county received 32 million visitors last year. That's a 2% growth on the previous year. 19 million of which are county visitors. The good news is that people are staying longer, which is benefiting hotels, and it's a sign of a strong offer. And you'll see later in this presentation how we're helping to stimulate that as well. Whilst employee numbers, there is a small growth. It is positive given there's a number of changes within the sector. in terms of businesses changing their booking systems, augmented reality now replacing guides in museums and attractions, and also with the increase in AI as well. A big milestone for us last year was the launch of the Tourism Growth Plan. This is a regional strategy, a 5-year strategy that takes us up to 2031 and is a blueprint for the sector as a whole. This has been an extensive consultation process, 12 months in the making, engaging with businesses, all local authorities across the county, government departments, and also our supply chain businesses as well. And the aim of this really is to get everybody involved and engaged. We appreciate that funding is tight at the moment, so this is not just, you know, the public sector strategy. This is everybody pulling together in order to deliver this. And there's an action plan that sits behind that with some key deliverables and milestones that need to be achieved moving forward. Again, when it comes to the strategy, our aim is to get big businesses involved, small businesses, third sector businesses, and it has been well received by the sector because we had our launch during English Tourism Week in March last month. Senior representation from every single district up to chief exec level, which was fantastic at the launch. And again, we was joined by the chair of Visit England, a lady in the middle there, Lady Victoria, that joined us. And again, very engaging, very enthusiastic about the city and county and this strategy. And there's a clear thread that links into the national strategy as well, because moving forward, when it looks, you may have seen things such as a government consultation around tourism tax. That will be playing a big part in organisations like ours moving forward. So government's gone out for consultation on a tourism tax, and it's likely that that will generate funding for regions like ours moving forward. So we responded to that, and again, it was a consultation with business to pull our views together for that government consultation. Like I said, there's a series of actions and campaigns that we'll pull together, public and private sectors will pull together, and that will allow us to promote, as you can see, some of the great venues and attractions that we've got behind us. And our job is really just to provide a spine. We'll provide a campaign, and then it's for districts to bolt on and to work with that, and they'll choose their best venues and attractions in order to be part of that campaign. So again, we've got a really good, strong regional offer when it comes to promoting to an external audience. An example of that is a seasonal campaign that was launched last year called Summer in Leicestershire. This is one of the reasons why people are staying longer. Events is a fantastic driver when it comes to overnight stays, encourages people to stay for more than a day. And what we try and do is work with districts to include them within the campaign, and then they'll amplify that through their social media, through our social media. You can see some of the numbers on there. It's 2.7 million reach on this particular campaign. And we create itineraries as well. So for example, if you're going to an event, we'll then create an itinerary of an attraction that's near and what things that you can do the next day, so we can extend that dwell time for those visitors. Just to give you a flavour, we've got around 800 events any one time when you go on the Visit Leicester website. That increases in the summer to around 1,300. And what we do, we work with district areas and venues and attractions, and we scrape their data and we put that on one place so that when you come into Leicester and Leicestershire, it's the place to be is Visit Leicester, because you can work out your itineraries as well. And around 6 out of 10 of our top pages, we've really pivoted to increase the amount of overnight stays. And 6 out of the 10 most visited pages are now all events related, because that is a great driver for additional spend and overnight accommodation. We do work with districts as well and do some targeted paid for activities. So all of our services are funded for districts. However, what districts have quite rightly done is they want their money to go as far as possible. So they realise by working with ourselves at Visit Leicester, because we've got that core of businesses and also in terms of our social media following, the money can go further if they're running certain campaigns. And also there's a lot of skills involved, because a lot of what we do is around how we look at data, how we interpret that, what the customer profiles are, and some districts may not have those skills. So as you can see from the report, there's a number of districts that work with us now on a sort of commercial basis, and they'll say to us, right, we'd like to run a campaign. Could we run it on Meta, which is like Facebook and Instagram, and then we'll do that to get it to as many eyeballs as possible, whether they're doing a fireworks display or, a Christmas light switch on. Again, there's a lot more detail available in Appendix B for members. Another significant milestone is the launch of the new website, the Visit Leicester website that was launched in May. I mean, this has been a significant reduction for us, particularly on running costs. So we kept our build costs the same as the previous website. And when it comes to running costs, you can see on there a 92% saving year on year, which is significant. But more importantly than that, it gives us more functionality when it comes to engaging with customers. The dwell time has increased on the website. People are clicking more pages, finding out more. And we are the first in England, I can't say the UK because Edinburgh beat us to it, but we are the first to use augmented reality on the website to identify your own itineraries. So, for example, if you're going to the Melton Scar Festival, as an example, you can say, where can I stay? What can I do the following day? And it will build your own personalised itinerary. And it only takes information from the website. It's fantastic. The most popular request that we get is when people are coming to watch the football and they want to know what pubs they can go along the route to the football. But, well, there'll be less demand. But the reality of that is because we control the information, it's just your personalised assistant who can help you with those itineraries. And that is something that we're improving time after time. I mean, we're trialing this for about 6 months to ensure the information it presents back to the client, is tip top. But what it also provides us with is data, because if we're missing a trick and we can't give a response to that, we can then put information on there that answers the question for next time. So we're constantly sharpening our sword. And we're going to need that moving forward, because you'll know yourselves when you Google things now, Google tells you the answer. You don't need to go to the website. So everybody's website is going to reduce, they say between 20 and 25%. So we need to make sure that it's not 20 and 25% for us. It needs to be written in a way, the information, so that it might only be a 5% reduction in traffic. And like I said, we're constantly analysing the data so that we can improve year on year. I mean, I've been here 3 years, and when I looked, I always compared myself to Nottingham and their Visit Nottingham site. We were 75% 3 years ago behind them in terms of the traffic and people going to their website. We're 4% now. We're still not there yet, but we've closed that gap, and next year we'll be in front. And a lot of the data analysis and improving upon what works and what doesn't is really important in this sector, so that we can steal the march on other destinations, because of course everybody's trying to do the same thing. And you've seen, this is just a lift and shift from the stats that are in the report. But again, when you see stats like that in terms of, social media reach has increased by 558%, that's not by chance. We're the most searched for things to do in Leicestershire and Leicester. We come above TripAdvisor for searches such as that on Google. And again, we keep working through the search engine optimizations and how Google are changing their sort of way of tracking followers and visitors. So that I'm delighted to see the growth and some of the stats that are on that screen. Moving on to inward investment, starting with investment events. It's a big part of what we do and how we engage, because it provides us with the opportunity to showcase our land and our development opportunities, but also best practice that's happening across Leicester and Leicestershire. And for us as well, it's really important to allow the property sector to see a face and put a face to the name, particularly when it comes to district leaders. So what we tend to do is we'll get either the chief exec or corporate director to present at these events to talk about what regeneration and investment is happening in their areas, so that if a developer is there, then they want to have that conversation about a particular development that they've got happening or that could be in the pipeline for the future. It provides them the opportunity to do that. So you can see the numbers on the screen. We hold a regional event every 6 months. We had 340 property professionals that attended that, and we showcased Blaby, Melton, Inkley and Bosworth Harbour, and then Leicester City. So again, we're trying to get a really good spread across the whole of the county. And selfishly for ourselves, it does generate leads and it does generate interest, which is obviously the reason why we do invest time in doing that. And that's the most recent event that was held last month. And you've got some, that's on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, we've got events such as UK Reef that we attend. And then there's some sort of guerrilla marketing, some coffee cups where we promote some of the key stats, facts and figures across some of those key events as well. It's also interesting to note as well that we are gaining a significant amount of support from the private sector. Conscious there's a number of changes happening with LGR across Leicester and Leicestershire, and the one thing that we are doing is making sure from a business perspective it's business as usual, and we've got to a stage now that businesses are putting their hand in the pocket to support these kind of events. So when you look at again in the appendix, you'll see that we spent, and by we, the city and county, 12,650 on events and expos. Businesses contributed 45,000. So again, they are, they're putting in the lion's share, and it's an opportunity to fly the flag for Leicester and Leicestershire. In terms of inward investment stats, again, pulled from the reporting, we landed 5 inquiries. That's from a total of 29. So a 17% conversion rate. You might think, well, that's quite low. There are businesses that will, request sites from multiple areas. It may be that businesses are just kicking the tires on units if they're not happy where they are currently. However, we do work hard to try and convert those, as you can see, and that's resulted in the figures that you can see on the screen. £39 million worth of investment value, £21 million worth of salaries. Slightly disappointing on the average salary rate. That's been brought down. There's a big chunk of jobs from Geary's Bakery, and that's brought that figure down. It's usually higher, and with the leads that we've got in this year, it will be for next year. But I just thought I'd raise that. In terms of live projects, there's this one at St. Gavan, which is an advanced manufacturing facility at Melton. We've been working on that for about 18 months. It's a fantastic example how we work with districts, is that we met with the property director of Sangaban, and originally the meeting was around them just wanting to utilise the space of an old factory just for open storage. And we said to them, have you got any sort of significant investment opportunities within the group? And they said, well, we have. He says, but it's looking like it's going to go to either Paris or it's going to Switzerland. I said, well, why is that? I said, well, planning is much easier. It's much easier to work in those countries. And obviously Saint-Gobain being a French company, it's more straightforward for them. And at that point, we then engaged with the chief exec, Ed at Melton, and said, look, let's do all we can. And we basically wrote a letter to the chief exec of Saint-Gobain and said, we will do everything we can to make that investment work. And let's sit down, let's have that conversation. They then said, okay, we'll put you in the top 3, we'll consider this as in the top 3, but it will be site number 3. And that's then led to that £100 million investment. And that's a great example of how the highways team at County Council have been working with a team at Melton together to land that investment, and it's a significant investment, and the quality of the jobs again is significant. The average salaries is high, and I can't wait to claim that next year, because it's been such a fantastic project to work on, and also another fantastic jewel in the crown really that we're really looking forward to pushing and promoting that once I've got planning, is the work at Loughborough University Science and Enterprise Park. And we literally were so close to landing a significant investment about 6 months ago. It didn't happen, and it's not through fault of the university or Charnwood. It was very much a downturn in business, however, for the business that was looking. But again, we see that as a real opportunity and a jewel in the crown where people will be interested in moving to that site. So that'll be something that we'll be focusing on as a key site when we're going out there and engaging with the sector. And that's it for me, Chair. And obviously I welcome any questions from the members.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Rowland.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It's very, very interesting. It's sort of tourism place marketing, something I did. I was lead member for 10 years ago at Charnwood. So something that's sort of been a big interest of mine ever, well before that, and certainly ever since. One of the challenges we had then, and we are going back about 10 years now, was the correlation, if that's the right word, between the city and the county. So we get people into the county, but the challenge was then getting them out to the, into the city, but the challenge was then getting them out to the county to sort of do county things, if you see what I mean. I was wondering, first of all, is that still a challenge that we face? And second of all, if so, what sort of things do you think we could do to sort of to overcome that? I mean, just sort of off the top of my head, is there any sort of potential to do joint ticketing? I know you get that in the big cities, flashes up on my Facebook for London and other places all the time. One ticket and you get into so many different locations. Could something like that be an option if we're not all already doing it? So just a bit more information on that, if possible. And the second question is, and forgive me if it's in the report, I might have missed it. Do we know what percentage, and the figures are fantastic in terms of the investment and the value to our area, but do we know how many people are coming into the area from outside Leicestershire and how many of those people are Leicestershire based going to things local to them?
Okay, so in terms of question one around that cross-pollination, it's still a challenge, but I've been here 3 years, and the challenge is getting easier year on year on year, because there was a number of walls up from multiple sides when it comes to that invisible border, if you like. And you'll see from the strategy, our growth strategy, we've got objectives specifically about that, because events drive so much in terms of outside visitors. So we met with John, well, believe it or not, last week, and they were saying, obviously, the big fair that they do, we're looking at what other events are happening that same weekend, so that, for example, if there's an event the day before, we can drive people to the fair the day after and work out an itinerary where they can stay, and vice versa, if they're going to the fair on the first day. So we're already working on that. We've considered ideas of the past. In the past, I think the thing is, with things like that, we need to get everybody on board. I think it's also fair to say 3 years ago, we didn't have every authority really engaged with us. Now we've got everybody on board, which is fantastic, so that, you know, the offer it's easier to join up. And the district tourism reps have been fantastic. We can't rate those guys highly enough. And that's where the key is. We provide the spine. And again, we work cross-regionally so that we can build an offer. So if you're a foodie, you can have a lovely curry in the city, and then you can go to Melton, you can have your pork pies, you can go to different areas and you can experience that. So it's getting easier, but we're not there yet, is the answer. But we're very mindful of it, and we're doing all we can to improve that. And then in terms of outside Leicestershire, yes, we do have those stats. I don't believe, we've itemised those, but that is something that we can do. We always analyse that data. We look at the drive times. You tend to find that the majority, I think London always shows as your top, because a lot of data is tracked via your phone, and it defaults to London. So that'll always show at something like 47%. It seems super high, but that's because a number of people that might be based in Sheffield that will default. But your top areas tend to be Birmingham, followed by Sheffield. As far as Norwich and Milton Keynes as well. So Norwich is quite high up there. I think that's usually the top 5. And we do every now and again see some peaks. Particularly, it tends to be sort of football related, so we track that down. So for example, when they were in the Premier League, Leicester, if they were playing Newcastle, you'd have a big spike around the football time. But I suppose, whilst I can't give you hard and fast now, I'm hoping I'm giving you enough to say we track this on a regular basis, so we can see where the peaks and troughs are and see how we can sort of maximise that best we can.
I know people are waiting, but I've kind of just got one to follow up as this. The first thing I noticed was it's called Visit Leicester.
Yeah.
Why is it not called Visit Leicester and Leicestershire?
Okay. Good question. And you're not the first to ask that, of course. This came as a result of when setting up the organisation back in 2017, they did a perception survey. And when it comes to, deciding on names of organisations such as this, and we're not the first to do it. It happens in Manchester, for example. Salford, they're under the Manchester banner. And it's more around what you associate with as a visitor. You know, have people heard of Leicestershire versus Leicester? Have they heard of, you know, district areas? So the decision was at that time, based on perception and people from outside visiting, is they'd heard of Leicester and that's used as the hook. But when we hook people in, it's about the experience, because a lot of people outside the area don't see the borders. And what I would say is, if you went on the Visit Leicester website, and I always get asked this question from City, why are we too county centric? And, you know, there's too much county things happening. So I've obviously, it's almost like having two wives, really. I've got to please both paymasters. But the reality is 44% of businesses that are on the Visit Leicester website are city, you know, compared to 56% are county. So whilst we might be called Visit Leicester, you know, it's about the regional offer. And I run the service as fair as transparent. I've got two paymasters, and there's winners and losers in every relationship. You know, on the accommodation side, 27 on city, 54 county accommodation providers. But yet there's 70% of events in the city, because more events are held, only 30% in the county. So there are winners and losers. All I would say to members is, we're mindful of it, we're conscious of it, and sometimes if we feel we're going a bit too native in one direction, we pull ourselves back. So it's more around the, you know, the regional offer to drive footfall and, you know, bums on seats and spend in the city and county.
I think you just said there it was last reviewed in 2017. It probably needs reviewing again. Yeah. So I think, you know, I would much, either it says Visit Leicestershire or Visit Leicester and Leicestershire. How much are we paying in each into this part? How much is Leicester City and how much is the county paying? What, 65 from county? City? Okay. Did you? Yeah, I mean, I've just gone on your Facebook page and there's hardly any mention of, is that a joint one? Visit Leicester, the Facebook page? Because there's hardly any mention of county on there. Or is that just the city one? The Facebook page is Visit Leicester.
Visit Leicester. So
exactly the same as what your website is. So the website has got some mention of county. So is the Facebook page just Visit Leicester?
Facebook page covers city and county.
There's hardly anything mentioned of county on there. I picked up one from Charnwood about Queen's Park. I've just had a quick flick through. So if anyone went on the Facebook page of Visit Leicester, it is very city focused. So,
okay, well
so I think there is, I understand about the balance and two wives, thank God.
Yeah.
I haven't got two husbands because that would be awful. But I think you're saying the right thing, but it's not coming through for me looking on the data I can see here.
That's fair comment.
Did you want to come back, James?
Yeah, thank you. So you mentioned Loughborough Fair, you know, and I think it's things like that. People locally would know it. People maybe slightly beyond wouldn't. Yeah, it's 800 years old. It's over 800 years old now. So what we had, an issue again we had years ago was, frankly, people used to say Leicestershire was somewhere you drove through on the M1 and that you didn't sort of think about going to as a destination. And yet there is a huge amount of history here. And on that sort of, on an extension of that, one thing a lot of people even locally might not appreciate is just how historic and globally important the Charnwood Forest is in terms of the origins of life on Earth. And I don't say that, I don't overestimate that. You literally have fossils there going back to when animals started emerging from plants. So it is truly globally important. And yet a lot of people locally wouldn't even know that was the case. Is there anything more we can do to sort of really promote that side of things? Obviously balancing that with not wanting to damage it, but sort of really promote that as something unique. I think is us and Newfoundland have it in the world.
It's as though we've collaborated before the meeting, but I assure you we haven't. In terms of your question, we're working on a campaign called Hidden Gems campaign, which is we promote, as you would expect, obviously your key anchor attractions, and they're the ones that are featured quite heavily. But as part and parcel of this new strategy, it's about the next tier down, the ones that local individuals will know about, but people coming from outside haven't quite explored or found them yet. So this Hidden Gems campaign is to do exactly that. It could be a gem within an existing big attraction, so it could be a great cafe within a big attraction. But we're working with districts at the moment. We've got a big list of the hidden gems that we'll be going out and promoting as a result of that, because again, it's about, whilst people are here, they might be here for a big attraction, what can we get them doing either in the evening, the afternoon, the next day? And that's where that campaign will come in. And that's a big ticket project that will be rolling out probably in the next three months' time, but that will go at least 18 months, 2 years, because we're really going to put some attention, some budget behind that, because we think it's what the city and county need.
And it has applied for UNESCO status as well, so that's going through the good time for us. Dr. Bloxham.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just got a couple of questions again. Again, about the data. There's a lot more data in this, and it's great. But it's all in isolation, so there's kind of an attribution problem there that, you know, tourism's gone up, brilliant, but has it gone up in the whole country? Have we gone up more than average, less than average, you know, that sort of thing. Same with the inward investment on page 31. It all looks great, all these jobs and things, but how are Northants and Warwickshire and Derbyshire doing? So that's the first question. It'd be good to see some more comparative stuff. The second one's about the social media. Again, these are big figures, you know, 1 million here, 2 million there, 65,000 views, but, you know, in social media terms, they're probably not that. I was just checking on my Facebook, and I've had posts that have over 100,000 views, you know, and I'm just a local councillor. So those figures don't sound that great. So without anything to compare them to, and you know, in particular, the influencers that we used for like Twycross Zoo, I thought that's great. You know, let's try new things like that. Brilliant. But then it said they had 11,000 views on YouTube for going to Twycross. 11,000 views doesn't seem much at all. That's, you know, how much did we pay them for that? So I'm not saying don't do that, but perhaps, you know, it needs reviewing and getting different people, or, you know, something. And then there's one really tiny question, which is about the chatbot on the website. I can't seem to access it. Is there like, should there be like a little icon? I'm not sure if it's the Leicestershire County laptops, because I can't access ChatGPT earlier either. I've just checked it. So I'm not sure if that's us or if it's the website, but probably the AI chatbot needs to be a bit more prominent, you know, an icon that you can open up.
In terms of the comparators, it is something we've not included in the report, but it is something that we do, and that's, we can quite easily include that for next time in the report. I mean, obviously I mentioned the stat about how Nottingham's doing and how we compare, so we do review that. Would be wrong not to. So yeah, that is something that we would include if you find that useful. With regards to social media, absolutely right. I mean, we can never guarantee anything viral. If it were that easy, we'd all be doing it. We try and use influencers that have a following. For example, the one that you mentioned at Twycross, I think that was influencers in Yorkshire that have got a really strong presence, and what we're trying to do is drag people down. What we did notice is when they're putting stuff to their own audiences, they do well if it's in their existing geography, but not so well if it's external. It's a bit harder going because we're trying to get people to jump in the cars or jump on a train and make their way down. We've got a lady called Brummy Mummy. Obviously, she's Birmingham based. We're trying to attract people from Birmingham. It doesn't do as well as it would be if, so Brummy Mummy, if she was reviewing a venue and attraction in Birmingham. But the aim is to attract. I mean, it is a fair comment. We try and, obviously, our team work hard. They've got they're working as creatively as possible. But the reality is, what does tend to stick best is the private sector. They're a little bit more edgy. We've got to be a little bit more sort of mindful of how we promote ourselves, so it doesn't, you know, land as well and go as viral as maybe some private sector organisations or influencers that we do. But it's a fair challenge, but we do all we can to, you know, present the attractions and venues in the positive light. But yeah, we may not have the edge of some of the influencers without the red tape that we've perhaps got to work to.
I mean, could it be that a lot of the people who follow Mr. and Mrs. Yorkshire or Brummy Mummy are outside of those places, and they follow them because they're interested in those places and the stuff they do there? So maybe using influencers from Leicestershire would be a good way their
Yeah.
followers might be outside Leicestershire and we pull them in.
We do, obviously, as part and parcel of the report, you'll see, like BLAV, we use regular influencers that are already in Leicestershire. We promote a lot of their content as well. We'll retweet their content and reshare their content. So we do that, but I suppose a big part of what we do is to try and attract people from outside to the area as well. So for us, almost the influencers in Leicestershire, that's day job stuff. What we try and do is do things outside of that by bringing Mr. and Mrs. Yorkshire to the area so that we can attract people to jump in the cars and jump on the train.
Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really happy about the number of mentions of Melton in this report. Football, rugby, racing, rural capital of food, breweries, theatres. We've got so much to offer. What I'm really, really scared of is another tax. Are we actually I know the government are lobbying and consulting. Should we put the strongest position back to say we can't, these small pubs, hotels, etc., they can't afford it. They can't afford it.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the consultation, we've engaged with business and we've put the views back of business. I mean, the tax itself is not going to be on the business. It's going to be on the individual, a little bit like when you go abroad and you'll pay that tax. If you go to Spain, for example, it's based on per head, per night, that kind of thing. There's still an administrative burden. It could put people off, especially if you're staying in a tent and your cost is £30 compared to 200. Sticking £2 on that is a bigger percentage than it is if you're staying in a hotel at £200 a night. But we fed that back, and it's also been mindful that this could be national policy. So therefore, wherever the visitor goes, they would be paying this. But I think it's fair to say as well is how it's looking at the moment. If the policy is accepted, it would be for the region, the area, if they've got a mayoral combined authority to make the decision whether or not they decide to implement or not. So I think that's all we can do is put our views forward at this moment in time, and it's a bit of a watching brief to see what happens from that consultation.
Mr. King.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I'm obviously very pleased to see again division mentions of Bristow Maze, very good, and also Foxton Locks, which was my previous division. That's a very important heritage site. I'm not going to go over what Dr. Bloxham said about numbers. I think that's really important. I think looking at performance and marketing, that's one thing, and obviously not everyone is looking at websites or Facebook or Twitter, whatever it is, and there's all sorts of channels which I'm not going to go on about. But one of the things I think is quite important to try and understand is what's the breakdown in visitor numbers between those that already live in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland that are visiting somewhere on a day out or something, and those who are coming from elsewhere. And I think that's really important. Where's the growth coming from? Is it coming from self-generated people who already live here, or is it coming from further afield? And the other thing is it's slightly the other way around. What stops people from coming to Leicester and Leicestershire? What puts them off? And what are the things that because obviously, with respect to all the members here, we don't kind of control lots of the things that do, but we do have a control over some of the things. So is it road congestion? Is it things like that that are putting people off, or the state of the roads? Because then obviously county council or city council has a role in that. Or is it car parking? And I'm sure we've all got our views about that, and we've all got views about the one-way system around the city centre and all that sort of stuff. But are those things that put people off? Because there are places that people go to, and I'm sure you, like I, have been to many of those, where you think, oh, that's a really easy place to get around. That's great. I'll go back there again. And you go to somewhere else, you think, oh, that's terrible. I'm not going back there. It's dreadful to get around. So that's be. I'm not going to mention any names of anywhere, but I just think that Mike, I think that'll be really useful and powerful to understand what are the reasons why people don't come here, and what can we do to. And picking up what Mr. Harrison said earlier about business supporting businesses, what can we do to get rid of the kind of the blockages that are stopping things happening? And that's what I want to try and understand. I mean, the concerns I have, I share the concern about a visitor tax. Also, a thing that hasn't been mentioned is the impact of the government's decision to reduce business rates relief on the hospitality sector and small businesses in particular. And that is much of the providers of a lot of these services. Okay, you've got one or two standout large businesses which won't be affected by that anyway. But a lot of our hospitality sector, and you mentioned food, Mike, and that's really important attraction. But a lot of those businesses are really struggling at the moment for all sorts of cost increases. And again, what are the things we could be doing to try and maybe that's kind of with your other hat on, what could we be doing to try and help those businesses, or to ensure that they can actually survive the economic doom loop that the government's created for the economy at the moment. And that's really important. So I think, I'm not trying to get too partisan and too political about it, but it is actually, unfortunately, that's where we are. And the economy is going through a very, very rough time at the moment. And this is really important. So just want to understand that. On terms of the inward investment, that's great. Your case studies, I really like that St. Gobain one. That's a really good one. I do understand that the lead times for these inquiries to actually start delivering is a long time. And then thinking about, well, a lot of the investment decisions businesses make, I'm sure, don't even come to past your door. Most of them, if I think about Lutterworth and Magna Park, yes, a couple of days ago they announced there was an announcement that there's a mega warehouse that's just been signed off by some company I've never heard of before, 750,000 square feet. It's huge, absolutely massive. Lutterworth North, so Magna Park North, it's called. And that's going to bring massive gain to the local economy. But that's the bit I'm not quite clear about, is in terms of the inward investment, and I've said this before, so what difference is it really making to some of those investment decisions? And the St. Gobain, that is a really good example, because they would have gone somewhere else. So it's really, that's what we need to understand, is what difference is it making, because most of the investment decisions are clearly going to be taken without any involvement of your team. And I'm sure that's right, but it's just trying to understand, well, how many of them would have done it? Yeah. And so that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Get better at this. I think that's fair comment. It's fair to say as well, when you look in the report, unless we've added value to that investment decision, we don't include it, because it becomes a nonsense, our world, if we're just including anything that we've read in a newspaper. So we can hand on heart sit in front of you and said, look, we've added value. And if you look in the appendix as well, it can tell you where we've added value, whether that be through recruitment, whether it be through putting sites under the nose in the first place, and they've chosen one of those sites to then kick the tires on it and do the deal with the private sector to move in there. So we do all we can to add value. And it's fair to say as well, if we don't add value, that list shortens. So we will engage with people. Like, it could be, for example, that example you've just mentioned, we might have engaged with them. And if they say, look, we're not interested, we can sort ourselves out, we then, that's it. And we don't include it in this. So I can honestly, and on not say that the examples we've, used are fair, transparent ones. So hopefully that answers your inward investment question. When it comes to the tourism question, in terms of Leicestershire, or Leicester and Leicestershire versus externals, it's currently sitting around 67% Leicester and Leicestershire versus 33% externals when it comes to those figures. Obviously, those fluctuate and change over time. We're averaging around 27% around 3 years external, so those figures are increasing, and it's something that we do monitor. We don't obviously get the data on a month-by-month basis; it tends to be annually, but it gives us that barometer as to where we are heading. What puts people off? Good question. again, it does vary. It's $1 million question, is that, but obviously in areas that are more rural, tends to be how to get there, bus routes, those kind of things. Sometimes overnight accommodation can be a challenge as well. So this is where we rely on the intelligence from districts to then pull together. If they've not got a hotel, where is the nearest hotel? So if we're doing a campaign around an event or an attraction on their patch, we'll do an itinerary and build in a hotel that's only 6 mile away or 4 mile away. We do the best we can on that. If we're talking city and less rural, some of the biggest challenges, we rely on area perception surveys that they do. So in the city, one of the biggest challenges is antisocial behaviour, things such as parking, and especially, and that varies on age as well. So students don't, or people at student age don't necessarily notice rubbish and litter, but people 65 plus do. So there's different tactics for different core groups that we try and adopt our style. So for example, it could be, again, using your comment about the Facebook advert, it could be that we're doing a big push on a particular thing in the city because a perception survey at the moment says there's a big thing and 65 plus are not coming into the city centre because there's ASB and there's challenges around cleanliness. So it might be just, sometimes we just give things a real push and get behind it, because if there's a perception issue or challenge at the time, we'll do all we can to address that. We try and pull that together in the action plan that we have. We've got a delivery plan, and we try and ensure that we're responding constantly to the data. And like I say, a lot of it is brought to us at the district tourism meetings on what their key challenges are, and then we try and address that through our messaging, our campaign messaging. Sorry.
Very quickly, I'm going to move on.
Yes, Mike, thanks for that. And just a quick question. Obviously, I'm sure you are working up some plans. You mentioned districts. Districts are going to get abolished one way or the other. So what's the plan going to be to kind of get that intel from the ground, so to speak? Are you working up a plan to deal with that? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we do work with districts. We have a good knowledge of what's happening within those areas. Obviously, I can't comment on what the model will look like, post LGR. Our job is to promote the region for tourism and for investment. We do rely on that local knowledge. But I suppose what I would say is a lot of what we do is very much working with people, working with individuals, and whatever model is taken forward, we will continue doing what we do. And at the moment, our job is to make sure that whilst there is a lot of change happening, we're bringing the private sector with us to show it's business as usual. Sorry, I don't know if you wanted to add further.
It's similar to the response to Mr. Innes's question. We've been tasked by the district chief executives to map all of that and then link it in with City and Rutland, so that no matter what happens, there will be a system-wide assessment or knowledge of who's doing what they're doing, how they're funding, how many of them are, and how they're contributing key priorities, and then that'll be put into the general data that goes forward to the group, which is the 10 chief executives managing the local government review process.
Okay, Mr. Quick, is there anything you want to add to what's been mentioned?
Nothing to add, no, thank you. I'm happy to take questions. I'm here for a purpose, but if there's nothing to be asked of me, then no, I've got nothing to add.
Okay, so thank you. The recommendation is to note the annual update. So on to item 11, the Youth Justice Plan, pages 53 to 88. So Kay Fletcher, Assistant Director of Children and Family Services, will introduce this item, supported by Carly Turner, the Service Manager. The lead member for Children and Families, Mr. Pugsley, has also been invited for this item. So welcome, Mr. Pugsley. We'll just wait for everyone to take their seats. Okay, so we'll hand over to you, Kay, if you want to introduce the item.
Excuse me. Yes, thank you. Our item is to present the draft youth justice strategic plan, which is a one-year plan for 2026 and 2027. Our officer Carly Turner is going to talk through the report, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Chair and members of the Scrutiny. Hello. Firstly, thanks for the opportunity to come and present the Youth Justice Strategic Plan for 26-27. I'm quite mindful that I'm addressing you as the Commission in your role of the Designated Crime and Disorder Committee for this purpose. And I do welcome the opportunity to set out how statutory youth justice responsibilities are being delivered locally and how they contribute to safer communities and better outcomes for children. So members have been issued with a full report and a draft plan, and I will pull out the key relevant detail prior to taking any questions. But before I start in that detail, I just want to link the work of the Youth Justice Service and the plan to the Council strategic plans. I think that's really important about how we're improving outcomes in Leicestershire. And so it's fully set out in paragraph 3 of the report. But there's some particular areas that I'm proud of in the service that I want to talk about. So the first one is how we contribute to clean and green, and that's through our environmental education programme and reparation project that we call Nature for Nurture. One of those projects is actually set up at the back of County Hall in those big planters, and we're currently in Spring Watch, which is bringing back all of the growth with our children into the new season. So it's a gardening wellbeing project that's focused on delivering across 3 county council sites, and is based on having purposeful conversations out in the open with children, promoting health and wellbeing. And then the next part of the work that we do that I'm really proud of is around our great communities, and that's through our committed volunteer offer. So we have a strategic responsibility to have adult volunteers that help in the service. They support referral order panels, and they also support appropriate adults in police custody. But what we've realised is actually we want our young people, our children, to be volunteers within our service and at the county council as well. So we've introduced young volunteers as a positive exit route from not just the service, but from the department as well. And within Youth Justice, they help us shape the service. So they're quite clear on giving us their voice through cycle. They contribute to our staff recruitment, so we don't recruit a staff member without there being a children's panel. If it's a front-facing role, or if it's a management role, then there's a child on that recruitment panel. They're all fully trained in recruitment exercises and in discrimination as well. And they also help strengthen our voice and influence that you can see as part of the plan. So we drive improved outcomes by connecting children to the right support and advocacy, managing risk and strengthening the offer for victims, including access to restorative approaches. And then we support the safe and well priority through identifying and responding to safeguarding needs for both children and victims within and beyond the home. During this year and last year, we had a strengthened approach on victims because we need to be compliant with the code, the Victims Code. And so we developed a children's offer because we recognise that more children are becoming victims of offences, and there's a potential of that overlapping from victimisation into perpetration. So we spent a lot of time and effort in developing that. So those are the areas we're really proud of in relation to contributing to the strategic plan. So just in terms of background, the Youth Justice Plan itself is a statutory requirement under Section 40 of the Crime and Disorder Act 1998. That Act sets out how the local authority and its partners will organise and deliver youth justice services. It set out the statutory responsibilities and how they should be met, and how partners will work together to prevent offending and reduce reoffending by children and young people. So the plan previous to this was a 3-year plan, but this plan is now produced annually rather than a multi-year strategy. This reflects that currently we're in a position in youth justice where there's a number of reforms that are going to be introduced, and we're not quite clear what those are. And the first one was introduced, and we had quite a short period of time to implement the knife crime legislation, which came out on the 1st of April. So we're working at pace in youth justice with increased reassurance and assurance requirements that allows a partnership to remain responsive to emerging risks, legislative change, local need, whilst maintaining clear oversight on priorities. So it's felt that currently, whilst we're at an impasse and we're not really sure what the government missions are and what that youth justice reform is, that we would present a 1-year plan that enabled us to understand that further. One of the reforms is that the Youth Justice Board will be disbanded, and they are our governing body. And a number of the responsibilities have been taken into the Ministry of Justice, so we're not really clear how that's going to work, and there's a year leading for that. So it feels appropriate that that year plan enables us to understand the direction of the Ministry of Justice too. So the strategic plan builds on the progress delivered under the previous period and continues to embed child first principles. And the child first principles are where we recognise children who have committed offences as children, rather than adultifying them and thinking that they're making decisions that are well formed and thought through. So it recognises that many children who come into contact with the youth justice system are also children with unmet needs, vulnerabilities and safeguarding concerns. And as such, the plan sits alongside wider work across community safety, safeguarding, health and education, reflecting the whole system approach to reducing harm. The Youth Justice Strategic Plan is owned and overseen by the Youth and Justice Partnership Board, which brings together senior leaders from the local authority, police, probation, health, education and safeguarding. The plan was developed collaboratively with those partners and ratified by the Partnership Board in March 26, with the Chair, who's Sharon Cook, our Director of Children's Services, signing the plan on behalf of all statutory partners, reflecting shared responsibility for delivery across the system. The board also is a statutory body in itself as defined by the Crime and Disorder Act. The board provides accountability for the plan, and we have quarterly monitoring meetings from the Youth Justice Board around our engagement with that plan. So in the report, I've mentioned the finances. So the service is in a stable financial position. We run well within budget, but we're currently awaiting confirmation of a multi-year youth justice grant from the Ministry of Justice, and confirmation of additional prevention funding, known as turnaround, is due imminently. We're also commissioned as part of a service that's delivered on behalf of Rutland County Council and have done for over 10 years. So for 2026, the plan confirms a continued focus on prevention, early intervention and diversion, alongside strengthened work to improve outcomes for victims, reduce unnecessarily escalation and criminalisation, and coordinate responses for children at the highest risk of harm, exploitation and serious violence. New developments that we're looking at in collaboration with our public health colleagues are introducing the role of social prescribing. We do that currently, but we haven't formalised it as a social prescribing project, and that's what we would like to do, recognising the role of unmet health and wellbeing needs and the need for purposeful activity for children. So the Youth Justice Plan is complemented by an accompanying quality impact assessment, which I updated recently. It's been strengthened to reflect a clearer understanding of inequality within the youth justice system. It recognises that certain groups of children experience disproportionate contact with and poorer outcomes, including some ethnic minority groups, children with special educational needs or mental health, girls impacted by trauma and exploitation, and children with care experience, along with those with deprivation and exclusion from education. The updated equality impact assessment has further covered religion, gender reassignment and sexual orientation as vulnerabilities to contact with the criminal justice system. These equality considerations are embedded within the strategic plan itself, reinforcing the importance of prevention, proportionate decision making. The Child First Trauma Informed Practice supports this. It's a key priority for the service and a golden thread throughout the plan. So in summary, the Youth Justice Strategic Plan provides a statutory partnership agreed framework for the delivery of youth justice locally. It's aligned with the Council Strategic Plan, responsive to national reform, and is focused on prevention, proportionality, and improved outcome for children and victims and communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Carly. Really good report. Thank you. Mr. Piper, is there anything you want to add at the moment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm pleased to present, along with Carly and Kay, the Youth Justice Plan to the Scrutiny Commission today. For many people, many young people, one mistake can quickly become a pattern unless we step in with the right support. Many face trauma, exclusion, or exploitation, and they need our support. Our responsibility is to protect the public and support victims while helping children to take responsibility and change direction. And this plan sets out a practical, joined-up approach to do just that, preventing reoffending, keeping children safe from exploitation and serious violence, improving education and training and wellbeing. It's delivered with our youth justice service partners, so the police, courts, health, education, probation, community safety, etc., all working with families and listening to young people. Getting this right really does change lives. It means fewer victims, safer neighbourhoods, and children supported to put things right. I also take this opportunity, Madam Chairman, to thank the Youth Justice Service for all their work and partners as well for the steady and often unseen work that they do with the children and families. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from members? Dr. Bloxham.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, good report. It's really good to hear that Leicestershire compares well with other surrounding counties. That's really good. Couple of questions. The second one might be better at Charles. I'm not sure. Sorry, the lead member. It was interesting to see about knife crime on page 55 that we've got a legal duty now to strengthen youth diversion work. And I just wonder, is there a sort of flip side to that where we step in to protect existing youth diversion work? So in other words, in my division, we've got a couple of 9-hole golf courses that are very relaxed. You know, there's no rules about clothing or anything. Lots of teenagers use them. One's got a crazy golf bit. They're both under threat from developers. Should we, as a county, be consulting on that and going in and trying to protect these things because they're existing diversion work for teenagers? And can we do that? So that's the first question. And then secondly, just reading about the racial disproportionality in the system. It's good that we're going to have ongoing scrutiny and keep checking quarterly data and things, but I just wondered what specific actions we're undertaking to reduce that disproportionality in the system.
Thank you for those questions. I guess the real success of a youth justice service and the system is about the preventative work that's done prior to avoiding any children coming in the system. So anything like a golf club, a youth club, anywhere where children go, a part of that preventative approach. So anything that can be done to save and secure provision for children in areas be really welcome, because we don't have, I've not put any data into the report, but in Leicestershire from January to December, we only had 52 first-time entrants into the criminal justice system, and that what the Youth Justice Board have told us is that's phenomenally low. It is incredibly low, actually, and it's lower than it's ever been for a number of years. So the more that we've got available for our young people, our children to engage in, the more adults that they can trust and talk to, then the more ability we've got to keep children out of youth justice, to engage them in activities, and also to make sure that if something is happening to them, that they've got trusted adults that they can have conversations with. So that golf club example is really great. Just in terms of
just checking, could we send somebody down to the appeal then to say that?
Shall I email you about that and see what the options are? Okay.
Any other questions, Mr. King?
Yeah, I'll pick up the second question. Oh, sorry. Did you? Yeah. So in terms of disproportionality, it's a systemic issue that tracks actually down to the birth of children, where there's a mistrust generally for our Black, Asian and multi-ethnic communities of professionals. There's a overuse of force such as stop and search that then brings children into the criminal justice system. So as a partnership, we're in the process of developing a plan. What we have got that's really strong is the ability to work with the police to advocate strongly with children and with the courts who will not will seek to keep children in the community, but what we need is more of a partnership plan that holds education and health to account as well, because what happens is children are falling through lots of gaps in their unmet health needs and their education. That then means that they have contact with the police, so we need to go further downstream with that. So our board is held quarterly. In June, we're doing a big focus on health, and we'll be looking at the outcomes or the engagement around our communities where there are Black, Asian, multi-ethnic families, and we'll be doing that with education in September as well. So we're shining a light and then holding accountability to what those areas are going to be doing in collaboration with us to work with those children. Thank you.
Mr. King.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Carly. So I've read this, and I think just to clarify, so youth justice deals with young people up to the age of 18, doesn't it? Is that right?
They can be up to 19 and 20, depending on when they're sentenced.
Okay. So we're talking young adults. I know legally they might be called children, but they're not really children in the broad scheme. They're young adults, basically. So we are talking, it's quite a broad range from, because, so what I think this strategy is a bit lacking on is KPI data. And I know you've got a lot of data, but you haven't provided any for us. So I'm a bit disappointed in that, quite frankly. There's nothing set out here in terms of what you're actually trying to achieve. I appreciate it's only a 1-year plan, but I've got absolute squadly idea what you're actually going to be hoping to achieve. How many young people are you seeking to, basically try and convince them that the error of their ways, so to speak, and all of that sort of stuff. And I've got no idea about past performance and whether past performance is a good indicator of future performance. You mentioned a couple of things, but there's nothing in this report that validates what that I can hang anything on. So one thing I did want to understand in the draft strategy, it says there's in the last year, which has been very successful, is something called a deferred prosecution service, which I understand is basically, instead of criminalising, basically taking young person before the youth court, they get a kind of, I'm not quite sure how it works or what it was described as. I'm sure my residents would be have mixed views about that, to be fair. But again, no data about what we mean by success. Is it, what are we talking about here? What's your definition of success might not be our definition of success. So I think we need to try and understand what we're talking about here. And that's the problem I have, Chair, with this report. I just think it's just not got any data in it, any information which I can really say I understand what it's trying to achieve, apart from not criminalizing young people because they've had a hard upbringing or they were born in the wrong place or something, which, there's lots of kids who are but don't become criminals, who don't have a life of crime. So I understand. I don't want to get into that debate now, but I do think we need some data, and it's disappointing it's not here, because I know we have a lot of this, and really things like this, we should have that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff about staff, and I don't really know why you've included all the information about staffing and all of that. I'm not quite sure why all the flow charts of all the department are in. I don't understand that, what the purpose of that is. But anyway, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. I'll respond to a number of those queries. So in terms of data, I've got some data. I do appreciate that it's not in the plan. The plan was supposed to be an overarching strategic direction for youth justice. And then all of that data is managed through the strategic partnership and accountability through that. But I will be back here in a year's time, so I'm happy to provide more context around that. The deferred prosecution scheme is, just to give reassurance, it's used only in exceptional circumstances. So we're not moving children into avoiding prosecution. It's used only around driving offences at the moment, and that's for children who it's a low-level driving offence, so not an offence that's occurred any kind of big police interaction, police chases, or any risk to life. It's for those children who might simply have just got into a parent's car, driven 100 feet down the road and then realised they've made a mistake. Ordinarily, they would go through adult motoring court and they would get fine, or the parents would pay the fine. The children would get points on a licence that actually they don't have legally able to hold. And what we do is divert them. We've got no statutory responsibility to work with those children. So by developing a deferred prosecution service, which is overseen by the police, it means that we can bring those children into our service. We can do a full assessment on them. We can make sure there's no unmet needs. We can deliver what we call Project Break, which is our motoring programme. So it covers children who use electric scooters and electric bikes as well, where they've been arrested and charged for those. And it means that if they comply well with us and they engage, then actually they don't end up with the fine and the points on their licence. Actually, when they then become an adult and are able to drive, they're not faced with £5,000-6,000 worth of insurance that hinders their life moving forward. So it's in very small circumstances that we can use the deferred prosecution service. But Leicestershire Police should be complemented, because that having a DPS means that it's a negative outcome for them. So they have taken the ability to help us work with children, a small select group of children, where we can apply that knowing that they'll get a negative outcome for it. It also links to the new knife crime legislation, which I know you picked up a minute ago as well, in the fact that some children, when they're in crisis and they want to harm themselves, they ring the police. And actually what they need are mental health services, but because they've been found in possession of a knife, they have to be arrested and charged for it. So the deferred prosecution service enables us to have a different response to those children who are falling into the criminal justice system, where they've been found with knife with intent to harm themselves. So it's a very small population of those children. And just in relation to the comment about the flow charts, and that I have to put them in there, they're part of the statutory requirement. I've not added things in there that are things that I've made as part of it. They have to be in there as part of the legislation from the Youth Justice Board. Yep.
Well, thanks for that, Carly. I didn't know you had to put all that really unuseful information in. But what will be really useful in this strategy is to understand, as I said, there's no KPIs set. So it's very interesting to you come back in a year and say, well, this is what we managed to do. But what's the objective you're trying to achieve, apart from very nice words and all the rest of it? And that's great. But what's the percentage reduction? There must be some key objectives, metrics you're trying to work against. And I don't know what they are. And that's why I'm saying it would have been really helpful if and I don't know if before this comes to annual council, they can actually be added to this report to just say these are the KPIs we're setting to achieve, because then it will give members and the public a better idea of what it is you're actually trying to do, rather than just lots of really nice, well-meaning things, which is great. But actually, that's what people want to know, I think. Thank you.
So we do submit 10 KPIs to the Youth Justice Board. However, the Youth Justice Board keep manipulating the data that they want from us, so we're not really clear what that data is telling us at the moment. So we collect it around, and it's collected at the end of an intervention with a child. So we need to start collecting it at the start, else we can't do the journey travel. But I could, in essence, tell you how many children have ended a intervention with us and have sought mental health support, for example. I couldn't tell you what that looked like at the start. So the measures that we're being asked to submit actually don't appear to be that helpful at the moment. So we're trying to do something internally within our own area. Some of those measures are attendance at our management board, and some of them are around education, but it's based on the end of working with a child. So we need to track back to have a distance. So if I could give you that KPI data, but in the context, I wouldn't be able to tell you what it looked like at the start of working with someone. And that's the journey that we want to go on, because that's us utilising our own business intelligence service to develop that. So I've kind of have a couple more minutes to go through a little bit of data. Is that okay? So in terms of our outcomes, we had 198 outcomes, which isn't children, because children can have multiple outcomes, and 43% of those outcomes were from court, and 43% were in diversion. That's a really strong place for us to be. We haven't had diversion data. We haven't had consistently for a number of years because it's a relatively new outcome. So that's something I'll map across, but we should be really proud as a local authority about the impact that we're having on our children. The missing 14% within that are actually being dealt with out of court. So they're the children that are getting community resolutions. We've got really good rigour around those because we hold a panel jointly with the police and our social care colleagues. Our children have a full assessment, and we make sure that the outcome is proportionate to what's going on for that child. We hear the victim's voice within that whenever they want to, when consent to work with us. And then we work with the child gravity matrix to make sure that's happening. So we should be incredibly proud that 50% of our, well, half and half of our children are going through court, because before, court was the only option for those children. Our other measure is remands. So that's where children are arrested and they're charged, but they're not held as being either safe to be in the community or that their risk of reoffending is significant enough. So from January to December 2025, we had 4 children remanded for short periods of time. And again, we should be really incredibly proud of that. You know, that some of those were only for 2-week remands, and it's really, I guess, upsetting that it disrupts a child's life, because then we need to bring children back into the community and resettle them. But 4 remands in a year is incredible. And then again, with children that received custodial sentences for the same period of time, it was 2 custodial sentences, but that was one child who received them one after another. So again, our performance is really strong in those areas, and it has been consistently in low single figures for numbers of years. So whilst it isn't in there, I have got some of the data for that period of time where we should be really confident about not just what the Youth Justice Service is doing, but the system around it to prevent those children.
Thank you. Mr. Innes.
Yeah, I was just going to help Mr. King's point there. Those are great figures, but what's the target for this year? So if you've got 43% of deferred, are you aiming for 50% or it? And I think that's the point you were making, Mr. King, I think more. Yeah. So you've got 4 remands. Are we aiming for 0 remands next year? Yeah, you know, it's that sort of data that I think we're interested in.
Okay, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with both my colleagues here. I think it's a very wordy report, but it does lack a lot of detail. It lacks a lot of the KPIs that we're all interested in. But and a good example is that you mentioned that you're incredibly low on first-time entrants, but we don't know what the reoffending rates of those people are. So that would be useful information to see, whatever you're getting in, we're actually stopping them going forward. One I'm particularly just pulled out as well was the counter-terrorism, which is the Prevent. I used to chair that board prior to last May. I've not heard anything of that. Is that something that the council is still actively involved in?
Thank you. I know Gurjit's on next to talk about Prevent. We don't have any Prevent children in our cohort of children at the moment, but we are actively engaged in that. So we do sit on the strategic group, and we are available, obviously, if children need that support as well. In terms of the KPI, could you repeat that question? Because I didn't write it down. The first question you had, sorry.
Yeah, so I was talking about your first time entrance into the system.
Oh, the reoffending. Yeah. So reoffending data is really interesting. So up until around 2 years ago, our first time entrant data was taken from the Police National Computer. And so what it did is it counted every child that committed an offence in Leicestershire, regardless of whether they were a resident in Leicestershire. And we have an issue with the growing number of private children's homes where children are almost, I guess, in the crudest way, imported into Leicestershire. So we were taking our first time entrant rates were including those children. We now submit first time entrant rate from our own system, which is why it's incredibly low, because it's then other areas have gone significantly higher. Our reoffending data is still taken from the police national computer. So it isn't representative of the children of Leicestershire, it's representative of the children that are living in Leicestershire but might not be resident. So that's something we're working on with the Youth Justice Board at the moment.
I think a lot of the answers you're given to questions is either you don't have the data, you don't have access to it, or it's not the data that you want. So is there a bit of an issue around data collection? Is that because of the legislation, or is that because of choices we're making in the council?
It's because of the way that nationally data has been collected, and the Youth Justice Board recently have moved into us submitting data from our own case management systems, but reoffending data hasn't formulated part of that. So what we are doing now, and we started it, I think, in the last quarter, so we're tracking our own reoffending cohort because we know that that's really beneficial. So we don't have trust and confidence in the national data, but we're tracking our own reoffending cohort to understand what that looks like for those children.
It's quite worrying that there's such a difference between national data, because that's the stats that will come out and allocate funding and all that sort of stuff is totally different to what is actually happening here. So that's quite concerning.
And other areas were claiming low first time entrant rates, and we were claiming those first time entrants in our figures. So it is balancing itself.
But not all local authorities are doing what you're doing. So we're still out of kilter with trying to get this
in first time
looking about how we're performing. We just can't do what the data we're asking for.
Yeah, with first time entrants, we're all submitting our own data now. So that now we're all really confident in it. It's the reoffending data that's still being taken from the police national computer that we don't know which, so you can't disaggregate it into any child level data. So we don't know if it's one child in there that's doing that, whether there are children. And so that's why we've chosen locally, which was a direction from our management board actually to track a local cohort.
Okay, so next year we should have some better data.
Yeah, we will do.
Okay. Just a couple of questions from me. Obviously this is a 1 year plan now rather than a 3 year plan. So is there any risk to that? And obviously you mentioned the reason doing that is because changes to the government. So if those government changes don't happen, are we going to move to a 3 year plan? Because the funding is for 3 years, but we're only doing a 1 year plan. So is there a bit of a risk around that at all?
No, there's no risk. We've been doing a 3 year plan where we've only had annual funding previously. It's just that we're just at an impasse where there's lots of decisions that are being made that I think it's really crucial to develop a plan that's meaningful to the children and the partners that we are working with. So there's no risk to any of the funding. The funding is, we're just waiting to hear on the figure. It will be 3 year funding, but the condition is that there's a youth justice plan every year. So a lot of what local authorities choose to do annual plans more than do multi-year plans. So I'll be here next year with a view on what the best way forward is with that.
And my final question is about the connection with children entering the youth justice arena that have SEND issues. And it seemed like it was one of the things that have been picked up. So what we're doing sort of as a wider, probably for Mr. Pugsley as well to answer about what we're doing wider to ensure those children with SEND are not falling into the criminal or the youth justice arena.
So within the service, so one of our management board members is the head of service that looks after SEND. So that's Michelle White. We've developed really strong, robust working relationships with our SEND colleagues. So we have data around our children and whether they've got EHCPs, what some of the issues are there. We go to each other's management board. So on a practical level, we've got that. I've been part of the meetings recently about the experts at hand around the SEND reforms and how we can contribute to that. And so there's a lot of work we're doing in the service. However, it does track back to earlier in education, which hopefully the experts at hand will do with SEND. So yeah, it's an issue across the youth justice system.
Mr. Poland.
Thank you. It's an interesting discussion. The previous job I had, previous day job I had, I worked for the former MP for Loughborough, and in that role spent quite a bit of time in the various estates in Loughborough, which were some of the most deprived, I think still are some of the most deprived in the county, I think maybe in the country as well. And it's interesting sort of talking to a community organiser, lady called Lorna Hughes, who knew everything there was to know about the communities going on Name Checker. And one of the things she said was antisocial behaviour was just like a huge issue there. Police knew all about it, and it's a big issue. One of the things she said, though, that stuck with me, she said, if you don't get kids by the sort of time they're leaving primary school, it is so much harder to then crack them back on later on. So with that in mind, and obviously we're talking sort of about older teenagers, as Mr. King said, is there any work that we can do to almost preempt that in, with the primary school age children, and actually the parents of primary school age children as well? Because in some cases it may be that they want of a better language, lack interest or whatever, but it also might be that they're struggling. Okay, and the will is absolutely there, but they're just not able for whatever reason to control and may benefit from that support. So it's not always that the parents aren't interested or are themselves feral. It's just that they may also be struggling with children who have SEND or whatever. And they get, again, some knowledge of what I'm talking about there. So those two sides of the question: do we get children at primary school, and do we work with parents?
So I guess this is where we lean on partners to deliver those services. So the services for youth justice start at 10 for the age of criminal responsibility. I also, as part of my remit, have youth work as well. So we have a big, a reasonable sized youth work offer that are based out in localities. We have someone who sits on all of the joint action groups across all of the districts as well. But ultimately, though, the primary age children would sit within our family help services, so targeted family help, to receive the support, because we would be looking at a family context around that. I do sit on the board of my little boy's primary school, so I know exactly kind of what you're reflecting there. So we do work in partnership. We do work with the inclusion service as well, where we're aware of the children that are at most risk of not being in education, but we would be working with partners that have got expertise in that younger age group to be delivering those services, in the hope that actually it's delivered and received really well. And then, in our data, it's shown that we haven't got a mass increase of first-time entrants. And I know that we were talking in the experts at hand session yesterday about the SEND reforms. It's about actually primary school, we need to be getting it right at primary school, getting it right early, supporting parents, and that was the real ethos of that. And SEND as well, that one of the bigger areas in youth justice around speech and language therapy, and we're commissioning that ourselves with a small proportion of money from health, but we recognise that 80% of our children do have speech and language communications, and actually the world that they're kind of functioning in is quite challenging for them. So we will shortly have a speech and language therapist in the service as well. But I guess the reality is we are dealing, 14 is the peak age probably of children coming in contact with the youth justice service. And so we know that a lot of the needs that are unmet have kind of developed and evolved at that point. So it is about other services and provisions and specialisms getting in there much earlier than we can, in a sense. No worries.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So we've submitted our comments on the draft youth justice plan. These will be considered by the Cabinet later this month, and then it will go to full council in May. So thank you very much for everyone. Okay, we'll move on to item 12, the Community Safety Annual Update, Revised Domestic Abuse Reduction Strategy, pages 89 to 220. So, Kay, you're staying with us, and Gurjit, you're coming as a Community Safety Manager, and Mr. Pugsley's lead member is still staying with us. So, Kay, would you like to go ahead and introduce?
Thank you. Yes, this item is to provide the Safer Communities Annual Update and an overview of the Draft Domestic Abuse Reduction Strategy, which is to cover the period 2026 to 2029. I'll hand over to our lead officer, Gurjit, who will take you through the report.
Thank you, Chairman. I shall take the paper as read and pull out some key points. Just to advise, paragraphs 5 to 54 concern the Safe Communities annual report, and then the views of the committee are sought on the draft strategy from paragraphs 55. So specifically, the team ensures the council discharges its corporate duties relating primarily to the Crime and Disorder Act, but lots of other statute in place. Carly's talked about youth justice. We support work around that. Antisocial behaviour, there's lots of regulations, new action plans coming down from government. There's a relatively new domestic abuse reduction strategy, Domestic Abuse Act in 2021. Prevent guidance, new legislation around that. So there's lots and lots coming down from government that the team have been leading across Leicester, and Rutland, as well as corporately. I won't so much go into the background, but in terms of service priorities, we work really closely with statutory, voluntary and community sector organisations, including the police, Leicestershire Police, the Violence Reduction Network. We do much of our work with them. Member earlier mentioned the legislation around knife crime. We work with the district councils, Leicester City Council and Rutland County Council, as well as health. Much of our work is to support vulnerable people. As I say, we do lead a lot of work across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. So, for example, with antisocial behaviour, whilst we understand there are local variances, we do look for a consistent approach and response across LLR, thinking mainly about our victims receiving a consistent approach. We are very much data and intelligence led, and I'm ready for a challenge about the lack of data in this report, which I'm preempting and apologising for, more to pick that up. But we do use data and intelligence in everything we do. So, for example, with the domestic abuse reduction strategy, we undertook a strategic needs assessment to really look at where the gaps are, what's working well, and what victims and survivors are telling us. And we very much look at a problem-solving approach as well, which is something that the police really looked at, and we picked that up as well. So moving on to prevent counter-terrorism. So counter-terrorism, prevent particularly, UK government multi-agency programme designed to stop people from becoming terrorists and supporting terrorism, very much focuses on early intervention and safeguarding vulnerable individuals. We work very closely with the City Council and the police. The City Council are one of 14 funded areas at the minute. Their funding is being cut, but because they were originally seen as an area where there was risk, predominantly from Islamic extremism, they did receive funding. This situation has started to change now. I've put some information about the government's contest strategy and the 4 Ps there. We very much look at prevent. Pursue is the space that the police and counter-terrorism policing look at. And then protect and prepare that in partnership we very much look at together. Moving at the approach to dealing with prevent, as I say, we have robust multi-agency structures. The committee member who mentioned the prevent, the councillor-led prevent group, that is no longer in existence. So that was the East Midlands group, very much bringing together lead members. I think because of the change in administration across a number of councils across the East Midlands, that has temporarily folded. The work amongst officers across the East Midlands continues. And we still have our LLR, prevent statutory groups and delivery groups in the channel panel. And we do still have the corporate prevent steering group, ensuring that corporately we are discharging our duties appropriately. And this includes training for staff, the council's venue hire policy to ensure that extremist groups or those who are kind of supporting extremist groups don't hire any of our venues, our properties. We're currently preparing for Martin's Law, which is a new piece of legislation following the Manchester Arena attack, keeping people safe in venues. We have the IT firewall, continuing to ensure people don't use council computers. And then just this financial year, we submitted a bid to the Radicalisation Fund via the Home Office, delivering training for people and parents, people who work with neurodivergent young people and parents of neurodivergent young people. While there's no report as such, we do have intelligence suggesting that particularly people with autism are more at risk of being radicalised. There's a lot in the kind of space out there, and I think academics are starting to look and pick it up and do some real research into this. We have again a Leicester and Rutland Channel panel, and following the Southport attack that occurred in July 2024, in December 25, the Home Secretary announced the launch of a pilot to test approaches to monitoring and supporting cases referred to Prevent. So previously, members may have picked this up through the media, previously a person referred into Prevent and Channel had to have an identified ideological view. So for example, far right-wing Islamic extremism, environmental, etc. This pilot looked at this fascination with extreme violence. So young people who might be fascinated by school massacres that happened in other countries, or causing mass devastation through extreme violence. So because of our strong partnerships, we were asked to take part in this, and we're just waiting for the Home Office review of the pilot. We did see a rise in referrals following Southport, and the channel panel was very busy, the pilot panel as well as the standard panel. We have to undertake a benchmarking exercise annually, and we have consistently exceeded every benchmark. Last year we exceeded all but one and met that one, and that was to do with communication. And this is, again, it's a national issue because of the sensitivities around Prevent. It's very much, we don't actively promote things we're doing around Prevent because of the backlash we often receive from communities. So the Home Office are aware of this, and we had a discussion, and it's something across the country. As I say, we obviously pick up when things arise and respond, but we're not actively promoting the Prevent agenda. The hate crime work links in very much with the Prevent work, and a lot of what we see coming through hate crime can it's preventing it escalating into the Prevent world. When, for example, antisocial behaviour, if there's a hate crime element, we regard that as an additional vulnerability and keep a real close eye on things like that. And there's lots of work being done corporately to support our staff when out on duty, for example, they may receive racist, homophobic, etc. comments. So we've set up a process internally through, and it's open to members as well, through the AssessNet, which is the health and safety data portal. Moving on to antisocial behaviour, a lot going on in this space, as you can imagine. There's a partnership approach again, and across Leicester and Rutland, we have adopted an incremental approach. So this is essentially a step process from when a report comes in to if and when it escalates into the courts. So a range of tools and powers. Antisocial behaviour is managed at district level at the minute. So the county council, we're very much supporting, coordinating, putting together the strategies and the policies, but the actual hands-on operational work is undertaken at the district. We work with victim support to ensure victims of antisocial behaviour receive a good response. And we at the County Council also deliver the cross-partnership antisocial behaviour training. Antisocial behaviour is very much partnership response from housing, from districts and through the police. And we've developed lots of easy read documents. So this is right from the documentation that goes out to perpetrators and victims, as well as for officers. Joint action groups have been mentioned in the previous report. So these are multi-agency, intelligence-led local partnerships. We at the County Council are reviewing the joint action groups and the minimum standards for these. And within that, we're bringing in domestic abuse. There was a domestic homicide review on one of our districts last year, where the learning was that there was also domestic abuse in the household, but it was the antisocial behaviour that was being addressed. And not as a result of that, but because the domestic abuse wasn't prioritised and looked at, it did result in a domestic homicide review. So on the new ESIN system now, the case management system, we have a drop-down box where officers can highlight that domestic abuse has been reported, and that can then be looked at separately alongside the antisocial behaviour, because the tenant whose name the tenancy is in may be the victim of that abuse and may not really be able to control the antisocial behaviour that's occurring in the home. So that's a piece of work we're looking at. And similarly around the prevent agenda, where young people are coming to joint action groups with specific issues, we're directing members of the JAG on how to make referrals into prevent. Quick word on the community triggers. There's some new government guidance come through. It's at paragraph 38 on my report. The ASB case review is a process that gives victims a right to request a review on their case. And we have to promote this process. And the government are changing the process around this to make it easier. So we are expecting higher numbers of these reviews to come forward. So we are looking at the processes and the minimum standards around that. We have in 2025 just launched a new case management system. The previous system had been in place for over 11 years, Sentinel. The County Council led the procurement of the new system, a huge project across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland and the police. It's getting there. We've already started developing the system. One of the issues that is the learning from it, that we migrated tens of thousands of cases from the old system to the new system. When those cases came across, some of them were duplicated. There were cases in there that should have been deleted, and that put us on the back foot immediately. So there's been a lot of work to delete a lot of cases off that new system. I think the other issue that has come to light is that we have such strong partnership processes across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland that the ESIN system, I don't think any system would have been ready for the way we work. We are leaders in the field, and other areas, other police areas, council areas are looking at us and what we're doing with ESINs and are really keen to follow in our footsteps in the developments that we're leading on. So coming on to the DA Domestic Abuse Act work. So new act in 2021 gave a number of directions to statutory responsibilities to Tier 1 authorities, so us as a county council. one of which was to have a DA local partnership board, which we have, and the lead member for Children Safe Children Family Services chairs that. We also, under that group, have started a group of survivors feeding into that board, so really making it relevant and quite powerful. So the next board meeting will have a representative from that survivor group on it. Paragraph 46 lists there the funding we've received to date. We undertook a needs assessment. The first one really looked at the gaps in provision for victims of DA. The government at that time were really keen that we work with by and for organisations, and we did a lot of work that other areas have really commended us on. So, for example, we have the only Gypsy Traveller independent domestic violence advocate in the country. We know that this is a community that don't report domestic abuse. Along with men, for example. So we have a specific worker on the helpline. We have specific workers and support for multi-ethnic, Black, Asian, multi-ethnic communities. We have specific work streams for young people, including therapy and family support. And the other positive in the Act is that young people are now seen as victims in their own rights rather than witnesses in a home. We know through the work we do, for example, with the Violence Reduction Network, that where children grow up in households where there's domestic abuse, they are more likely to become victims or perpetrators, not only of domestic abuse themselves, but of other forms of crime. So I talk about the needs assessment in there, and I believe it was attached to the report, so you do have a copy of that, and that was the second needs assessment that we've taken. And the second one looks at the benefits of the services that we commissioned the first time round and what difference they have made. And we're currently going through that tender process with a couple of the services now. So that brings us on to the consultation of the domestic abuse reduction strategy for 2026-29. I was advised last night that we've only had 7 responses. We have pushed it far and wide. I'm doing another push from last night. So please do push it amongst your communities and your constituents. I co-wrote that with survivors, young people, older women, men, Black, Asian communities. I am going out to meet with a group of survivors next week to consult with them. So there's a lot of work going on the consultation. We've prioritised 4 areas. The first one being improving data quality and information sharing. And this is really because we've undertaken our second needs assessment, and when we went out for data, there were still gaps in what we could get hold of. So there's going to be a lot of work around that. Early intervention and prevention and communication. Communication is in there because every survivor I spoke to talked about that if they knew more about what domestic abuse was, other than physical abuse, if their families and friends knew what it was and where they could access help, if teachers knew more about it, then they think they probably would have accessed help sooner. Targeted support and safe accommodation, statutory duties, and strong partnerships. The Violence Reduction Network, based at the police, have also picked up domestic abuse as part of their strategic objectives now, as opposed to only public place violence. So we will be working very closely with them. And I think that's all I'd like to cover, Chairman. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Gurjit. Very thorough report, and thank you for highlighting that. Just about the consultation, I'll get Joe, if take it back and get it sent out to all members, the link, so it's easier for us to share. So if we take that back and we can get it sent out and try and push that a bit more. Just one point for me before I open up to questions, really disappointed to hear that the East Midlands Councillor Group has folded. I was the one that helped to set that up, and it was a really, really useful place for us to have wider regional discussions about Prevent and what we were doing in our councils and stuff. So I would urge Mr. Pugsley to take that back to a regional college and get that back set up, because it was the Home Office briefing that we got, and it was really helpful for us as councillors to understand what was going on. So I'm really disappointed to hear that's folded since last year. So hopefully we can get that back set up. So any questions from members before I go through my few more? Mr. Smith and then Mr. Poland.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think you've just read my script there, some of my notes. So I would urge Mr. Bugley to get as much as you can across the whole of the East Midlands, because terrorism doesn't really respect county lines. So I think it's really important that we do get that back. And also interesting that you said that it was officers now leading that and it carries on. That's all well and good, but we're all elected members and we're probably a little bit more in touch with our local communities, no disrespect to officers. So I think it's really important that we get those direct intel from the Home Office as well, so that we can share that information amongst elected member colleagues as well. The funding that you mentioned, that being cut for around in Leicester itself, that really does concern me, because it wasn't that long ago that Leicester was almost up in smoke due to a cricket match, I believe it was. So to cut funding on that, it just seems absolutely crazy to me. And I think, if I recall, it was about £10 million worth of police reserves that was used over that period of time. So is there really a saving benefit there, you know, by cutting that money? So if you could, please.
Through you, Chairman, yes, that because it's slightly separate. The community tensions, as they're called, were not specifically Prevent related. So within the city, the Prevent funding is being cut. So it's the officers that lead Prevent in the city. So there's a new community officer who will be working across Leicestershire as well. So that's positive for us. The education officer funding has been cut. But the council are looking at mainstreaming that post, and that post supports us as well. But I do take your challenge. The government, I spoke to my colleague in counter-terrorism this morning in prep for this meeting, and he did say, in light of the Southport review, there's a lot of work going on, as you can imagine, around Prevent. So one of the things the government is currently looking at is the front door to Prevent. Is it going to be one agency, or is it going to be a partnership approach to that front door? So they are looking at that. I mean, if you like, I can give a little, very kind of not detailed, but some overview of the picture of Leicestershire. So through you, Chairman. So Q3, which was October to the end of December 25, was extremely busy, as you can imagine, and it has settled down somewhat. The biggest areas for numbers are Charnwood, large geographical area, and Hinckley. Now, the district Prevent rep sits within Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council, so probably doing lots of work around how to refer with schools and other agencies locally. So over half of our referrals have no ideology, and that's our highest category, followed by the right wing. And then Islamic extremism is the lowest category for Leicestershire County. Over the last 12 months, 10% of referrals were females. That's higher than previous years. And whilst the average referral age is 35, the biggest group that have been referred in are 11 to 15. So that suggests schools are the highest referrers, with the highest kind of average age group in that being 14, which was interesting because it's the same age that Carly mentioned earlier. And there's a greater pressure now to understand online vulnerability. And again, there's a lot of that in the media. And then in terms of Southport, I just wanted to pull out a couple of points that were made in the review. It was a really balanced review, and there's been no backlash to it, which is quite interesting. The review mentions neurodiversity, as I have earlier. Across Leicestershire, we've been mindful of this for a couple of years, which is why we last year and this year have looked at training. Disguise compliance, so where people will say, yes, I understand, I won't do it again, but actually they're still online, etc. And then interestingly, in the review, the parents of the attacker and the taxi driver were identified and criticised for the part that they played or didn't play during the attack. So I think, again, it's very much about communities getting involved and us all taking responsibility and not just being bystanders, being active bystanders and acting.
Want to come back quickly?
Yeah, I take on board your point there, especially about the young people. We see it, you see it all the time, where you see young people, idolising people like Andrew Tate, for example, and then gaining a massive social media following themselves, and then spreading the same sort of rubbish. So it is really important that I do think we intervene really, really early on that. Just going back to your point on the Leicester issue, obviously, yeah, it was around cricket and everything like that. But as with any civil disturbance, what we tend to find is that the extreme gangs are straight on the Twitter or whatever they use these days, and they're almost hijacking it. And that's where I think this, Prevent can really make a difference.
Mr. Poland.
Thank you very much. I was actually going to ask about sort of what the main groups of people that Prevent work with are, and you've answered that, so thank you. But sort of expanding on that, does any work go into understanding why people develop extreme ideologies? What causes that? I remember doing a course, I think it was, I don't know, again, probably 10 years ago now, and it sort of talked about, I forget the exact term, but it's a circle of extremism. And it said, you get terrorists, and there'll only be a very, very few people who are extremists and terrorists, and they're in the centre, but a slightly wider circle around them would be people who won't commit violence themselves, but would sympathise with those that do. And then beyond around them, you'd have those that don't really sympathise with but would understand the basic grievance, and it sort of goes out like that. And it's sort of understanding how you go through that circle. And is any work sort of done on that, understanding how someone goes to become the centre, to become the one that is extreme, and what can be done, obviously, to prevent that? That's the first question on that. Second one, again, it's difficult, but you mentioned in your presentation that we ensure that our properties aren't used by extremist groups. So clearly, that's very important. How do we do that in practice? So there was a case in a village hall in Leicestershire, I won't say specifically where, although I think it was in the media, where a wedding was booked. And that's fine. That was what the hall was used for. They opened it up. Turns out it wasn't a wedding. It was actually a far-right rally. And that only come out after the photos run. And I think it was Britain First or someone that had the flags, and it was like something from 1930s Germany from the photos of it. But I know I was talking to the people that were responsible for the management of the hall in question. And they said, it was a wedding booking like any other, and there was nothing at all to suggest that it wasn't what they say it was going to be, of which we have many every year. So how do we sort of in practice stop that sort of thing happening? And I do have another question, but it's on safe accommodation, so I'll ask that separately, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Poland. I'll take the second question first, if I may. You're right. Because they booked it as a wedding reception, there was the administrators at the hall did nothing wrong. What we've done now is we have policies of how to undertake due diligence to do the best you can to ensure it's not an extremist group. And we deliver training on that. We do that annually. We work with our districts and boroughs as well as our county council corporate departments. So there's lots of work being done around that. The other thing we've done on the back of that particular case is I think the person who kind of managed the hall did realise, because they passed through or put their head through the window or something, and at that point, I think they weren't sure what to do. That's the bit we've now tightened up. So if after the booking you realise, or during the event you realise, this is the person in your locality, they're in the police person to get in touch with, and then they have the right contacts if we need to deploy counter-terrorism policing, for example. So we have put everything we can in place, but yeah, sometimes what they'll do is they'll go from one area to another to try and get bookings, but what we are doing as much as we can, and lots of training and information and signposting. In terms of your first question around the causes of radicalisation, it's something that's been discussed, researched, lots of academic reports for years. I mean, I'm sure many of you know the series and the film This Is England, looking at far right in the 80s. A lot of the time it's looking at disenfranchisement. Yeah, so if we look at, for example, far right, immigrants are coming, they're taking your houses, they're taking your jobs. That causes fear, that causes somebody who's vulnerable, who is unhappy with their own life. They feel they can't get a house or a job, so they start looking online, and things algorithms take them to certain groups. So there is a lot of work around that, and through Prevent and Channel, when somebody is identified, the process is that the person who works with them works through those feelings and those thought processes and gives them facts and figures and the actual, this is the reality of it, and works through them that way. It's the same with exploitation, so criminality. When we look at young people who are exploited to run drugs around county lines, for example, there may be issues going on at home. Somebody will offer them a new pair of trainers to take this package. It's very similar kind of ideology and psychic, that's not the right word, but I'm sure you understand, psychology around it. It's that belonging to something and belonging to a group and a family. But yeah, there is a lot of academic research around that.
So, yeah, second question's on something totally different. Safe accommodation. It said in the report we should have 70 places for the size of our population. In fact, we only have 21, so obviously puts us 49 places shy of where we are, which is a massive amount. What's the reason for that, and what's being done to sort of get us where we should be?
The primary reason is the lack of housing. So there's so many challenges. We know people leaving care, we can't get housing. Homes for Ukraine schemes changing, there's no housing. Asylum, immigration, there's just not enough housing across the system. So we are looking at, for example, house builders, whether under that districts and boroughs can identify one or two houses on an estate, for example. We do have refuge accommodation. We're looking at how we can support victims where it is safe to do so, to stay in their own home and the perpetrator be evicted, for example. But of course, we can't leave perpetrators homeless, but it might be easier to rehome a perpetrator rather than a family. We're looking also at sanctuary schemes whereby the victim is able to stay in their own home with the appropriate support in place and the appropriate safety put in place, locks, bolts, fire, etc. But we would never leave a victim in their own home where if it was not safe to do so. We look out of area. It's a national problem. We do look at out of area, but it's a factor for victims to not report domestic abuse. They don't want to leave their home. And if they've got a pet, it's even harder. So within that funding, when we've looked at dispersed accommodation, we have looked at accommodation that, for example, will take pets, larger families, and access for people with disabilities or older people, for example.
You mentioned about the difficulties you had getting in my various jobs. I've work with people who've got local connections, and some people have very local connections. You know, some of a couple of villages away, then if it's too far for them from their parents or their schools or whatever, and that's right. But the point I want to comment particularly is the point about pets. So pets are very much part of people's families, yeah. So they got the dogs, and it's very much it's integral to your part as any other. And again, in predominantly when I was working in the MP for Loughborough, we had cases whereby exactly that they needed to be moved either because of domestic violence or because of homelessness, which is a slightly different thing. You get the accommodation, they say we can house you, but your dog's got to go, and it was, you know, it's like some people, it's like giving up a child. And it's something when I was lead member for public housing at Charnwood, I put a lot of work into, because it can't be right that if you're escaping domestic violence or homelessness through no fault of your own, that you're forced to give up you know, an animal that's a beloved part of your family. And I think that's an important point. So I'm glad that's been acknowledged in that we're doing work to try and help people in that situation, especially when, and I had a case where this actually happened. A girl was a daughter. She was, I think, 8 or 9 at the time. Who had to, you know, her only friend in the world, she'd been moved 3 times, I think, because of domestic violence. Her only friend in the world was this dog. And they were like, yeah, you got to give your dog up. And I'm like, that can't be right. We went up to war with that one. But it can't be right in those circumstances.
Okay, Mr. King.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Well, there's quite a lot in this because it's 2 things together, isn't it? It's the community safety annual update and the revised domestic abuse reduction strategy. And actually, Chair, I think with respect, this should have been 2 items separately rather than being lobbed together. But anyway, we are where we are. I think in terms of the consultation, which you mentioned, but the strategy is very wordy. I think that, to me, that's written for stakeholders. It's not really written for members of the public to understand exactly what it means. I've read it, and I have to be honest, I'm not an expert in this matter, but I'm sure what it says is very good. But you know, I don't really understand what, you know, the totality of it. So when you say there's not been many people responding to this, I can understand why, because I don't think it's really that kind of, I can put it, user-friendly or written in a way to encourage people to respond to. I think it's a very technical document, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not necessarily what I would have thought we would have put out into the public domain. So that's me being very uber critical, but I'm not trying to be. I'm just trying to be helpful about this, why maybe you haven't got as much response as you perhaps thought you might. The other thing is just on the domestic abuse reduction strategy. I know that this is safe accommodation and everything else, but I notice on the map, which is very helpful, that there's no accommodation in South East Leicestershire and Harborough, Blaby. And having been with another hat on at a planning committee last night in Harborough, we've approved gazillions of homes. So there's not a shortage of planning permissions. I think maybe there needs to be more of a dialogue there as to what they can do to help, and they certainly have got money available in their social housing fund to do some stuff with that. But let's not dwell on that. It'd just be useful, because obviously if you were someone who needed safe accommodation at the moment, you've got to get off to Charnwood or some other very long, you know, and quite often people in these circumstances don't have access to transport. And buses are all very well, but from where we are, you'd struggle to do that. So that's one thing. I think just coming back to the community safety annual update, though, that's interesting. However, I was a little concerned what you said about the prevent agenda. And, you know, so let's just look at this. So first of all, the official terrorism threat risk, according to the government and MI5 is substantial. That is a very, and it has been for quite a period of time. Before that, it was severe, and it kind of floats between severe and substantial depending on what's going on. But over the last couple of years, we've had a growth in anti-Semitism, which isn't mentioned in your report at all. We do have people of the Jewish faith in Leicester and Leicestershire, and it's not even touched on. There are open displays of anti-Semitism in Leicester and Leicestershire. People have had marches, they've had demonstrations. That is not referred to in this report at all. You mention far right, but there's no mention in your report or in your narrative about far left extremism, which is equally as odious and obnoxious and everything else. And also, you've touched on it, but we've also got no real mention, despite the demographic and the cultural thing, about radical Islamists or other radical religious groups that do exist in Leicestershire and Leicester. There are supporters of those. I've got absolutely no doubt about that. And I'm just quite concerned that you said early on in this report, in your narrative, that, well, we're kind of not really saying too much about prevent. I'm sorry if that misinterprets what you said, but what I understood you to say was, yes, we're doing prevent still, but we're not really mentioning it because it's a bit of a, it upsets people too much. Well, it doesn't upset me too much. I want to know what you're doing and what we're doing to tell people that, thinking about blowing people up or whatever it is, or setting fire to buildings or whatever it is you do, they are bad things to do, and you should not be doing them. And if you know someone who's thinking about doing it, you need to tell someone who can do something about it. And whether that's a school kid or whether it's someone who's older, we don't need to be shy about saying those things, and we shouldn't be. And I'm very concerned at what you said. So I'd just like some reassurance about this. And I've looked at the numbers in the report. The government has got a very helpful website showing our comparison with other regions, and we're actually quite high up compared. We're not far off. I think the West Midlands is the highest region for the number of cases per million population, but we're not far behind them. In fact, actually, we're just under where the London figures are. So I think, obviously that's East Midlands region, so we're only part of that. So I think, given the connectivities and everything else, that's why I'm concerned about what was said, because this is a very serious matter, and whether it's interpreted as something else, but, we need to be, this has got to be up square and front, that we are not shy to say that we are supporting we are working on the prevent agenda, and it is, one of our top priorities to stop young people, anyone, being radicalized by whatever ideology or none, to actually then go around and do horrible things, because that is not what we want to see, whether it's whatever means people use to do those things. So we have got to not be shy in talking about these things. Thank you, Chair. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. King. Really good challenge there. So when I talk about not talking about prevent, that is not what I meant. So we do a lot of training. We go to schools, we do member training, we do staff training. We talk a lot about prevent. When we delivered that first training session for families and people who work with neurodivergent young people, we publicised that, for example, on our Leicestershire County Council website. Well, we had to take it down, and on our Facebook pages, etc., because we receive such a backlash. You're saying all children who have autism are terrorists. This isn't right. So we're just really mindful of the messages we put out. We don't say we don't put any messages out, just really mindful of the type of messages we put out, because it's such a sensitive area. Messages can be misconstrued around prevent. Around the Jewish community and the other hate crimes and hate incidents. Again, we do a lot of work with the police. Leicestershire County Council were leading, have been leading on the hate strategy across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland for years. And now the police, under their Prevention Directorate, received Home Office funding. So we're working really closely with them. We have the Speak Out space. And again, the comments that are received have to be managed, is what I'll say. But we do a lot of work with our communities across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, supporting communities. So there is a lot of work. I guess what we do talk about let us know, we can support you. What we don't do a lot of is what you say, that this is what we're doing on prevent. So when Martin's Law is becomes statute and we have a policy and a process, we will state that this is what Leicestershire County Council is doing in response to Martin's Law, for example, and these are our policies and strategies. The fact that we have a lot of referrals, again, is down to the amount of training we do, and the confidence that, for example, our schools have in the partnership process and counter-terrorism policing across the East Midlands and across Leicestershire and Rutland. There is a lot of work in this space. And because of, again, the sensitivities of it, when we talk about the CTLP, the counter-terrorism local profile, again, that previously schools specifically have said, but there's nothing in here that we can pinpoint, because the counter-terrorism policing and the Home Office don't want specific information out in communities. Because again, I know I keep using that word sensitive. We have to be really mindful of the sensitivities around a lot of the investigations that are going on and a lot of the work that goes on around prevent.
Yep.
So, okay, thanks for that. So I know about autism. Okay, I've got 2 people who've been, and there's a literal interpretation of words. I understand that. So we have to find a form of words that can kind of pass the literal interpretation, black is white, absolutely, clear as, because I get that, okay? But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about, we don't even touch on, in your report, it doesn't even, it mentions other things, but it doesn't mention the growth in anti-Semitism. That is a statement of fact. It is happening. In Leicester, you can go into Leicester, there are people openly demonstrating, have been over the last 1.5, 2 years, anti-Semitism. In other parts of the country, you've got people going and knocking on doors saying, can you tell us what you think about, I won't use the expression, but, basically people trying to, create lists of people. That's a very dangerous territory. Very dangerous territory, and we need to be absolutely clear cut. The Leicestershire County Council is fully square against those sort of activities. Now, I'm not hearing this, I'm not reading this, I'm not hearing it, and I'm very concerned, Chair, that we are not sending the right message, that we will not tolerate any form of extremism, whether it's left or right, whether it's radical Islamist, radical Hindu, radicals, whatever it is. There's no place for that in Leicester and Leicestershire. And I'm not hearing that. And that's what I'm concerned about. I'm hearing, well, we can't, we've got to be careful about people's feelings. Well, yes, we have. But we've also got to stop these things happening, because if we're only going to worry about what people think, instead of what we're actually finding out who these people are, who are the propagators of hate and ideological hatred, and actually encouraging people to take these steps towards moving to become some radical terrorism of the future. I mean, we need to be much more. I know you can't go into operational detail. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm just trying to understand, as a council, we are actually taking a strong stance against this, because otherwise, what is the message we're sending to our residents? And I'm not clear that we have one at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Did you want to on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's a bit of a follow-on from that, actually. So I grew up in the 80s, where the IRA was a regular thing that we saw on the news, and I served the Crown in the 90s, where we actually daily had to check our vehicles in case somebody would have put explosives under them and things like that. So it was very much real. And we're seeing a resurgence of that, but obviously from a different demographic now as well. And this really, really concerns me that we're not taking it seriously, I don't think, as Mr. King just said there, because we're worried about hurting people's feelings. Well, so I'm sorry, but we are trying to prevent terrorism. Terrorism kills. I've seen it firsthand. Terrorism kills. Hurting people's feelings doesn't. And I think we need to take a little bit more of a broader view of this. You said that you had lots and lots of complaints about people taking offence to it. I would like to know what percentage that is in comparison to the percentage the people in Leicestershire. Are we talking 10% of the people in Leicestershire, 1%, 0.5%? Because it's very easy to get an email list coming through in the morning where you've got 5 complaints, but realistically, that's that many. Thank you.
Just to add to that, when I was the lead member for this as well, and we were working with East Midlands, we had a campaign about prevent across the East Midlands, and all our comms officers shared exactly the same thing, and that was front and centre of the county council's agenda. And I haven't seen any of that, and I'm with you. We don't see any promotion of that at the moment, and I think you are right. We need to see more of it. I don't know if you can add anything, or whether there's something you want to take back and come back to us.
I think the only thing I'll take back, and the only challenge that I think I won't accept, is that we're scared to hurt people's feelings. We're really not. I also grew up in the 80s, and I'm feeling those same feelings as an Asian woman living in England right now. So it's not a fear of hurting people's feelings. It's really about the reputation of the council. I think we do a lot of work. We've done this notice, check, share. And I think following Southport, we'll be given far more direction from the Home Office to do more, which will focus us. But certainly around hate crime, as I've said in the report, we do work corporately to support our own people, as well as the work that we do across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. And actually, Leicestershire, I would go as far as to say we do more than the city around this agenda. Bearing in mind the diversity in the city, the community safety team do more work around the hate strategy and hate crime and hate incidents. So not even when it's a crime, when it's not in that criminal space, we do a lot of work around that.
I think,
thank you, Chair.
Just the challenge back to you is that we're not seeing it or feeling it as members. So that might all be happening, underneath, but we're not seeing it as members. So when residents are challenging us, saying we can't go back to them. So I think there's a balance to be had about how you feed that to members, and that's probably something Mr. Puggle needs to take back, about how we get that sense of that we're informed, that we can then inform our communities. So I think that's my challenge back. Did you want to come in, Mr. Puggley?
Yes, thank you. Just following on from that, I think there's a lot of interesting points that have been raised, and as you said, it is something I will take back for discussion regionally with other lead members, just to see sort of where they are, as well as you speak a lot about sort of working as the East Midlands. I think it was Councillor Smith who said, obviously, these sorts of things don't respect boundaries. It's a point I do take on. So I will go work with other lead members and see where others are regionally as well, to see how all of us can keep members informed on that.
Thank you. Okay, Mrs. Danks.
Would it be possible to have more information, details of what training is undertaken in schools by Prevent?
So there's a slight issue is the academies. So we do a lot of work with the designated safeguarding lead for every school, and then we will go into schools if they ask us to go in. But with a lot of them being academies now, they do pick up their own Prevent training from private providers. But we send out information to school governors and to all safeguarding leads, and we do send stuff out through the head teacher's briefing as well. So schools are aware of the offer. They're aware where to signpost to, where to make referrals into. And the education lead in the city has been into county schools as well to deliver specific training. We've even done training with parents. So there's quite an offer for schools.
Do we get to know what that training is? Yeah.
So in terms of Prevent training, people can't just go in and provide anything. It has to be accredited. So the training we provide, so members might recall in January there was some training. We have to adhere to Home Office accredited Prevent training to ensure we get the right information in there.
Just one question to me, totally off different subject now. The community trigger, or the ASB reviews, as they're now called, you think there'll be lots more coming up because the criteria's changed. I think the concern for me is that those only happen when action hasn't been taken at the right stage. So it's people that are not happy with the response they've got or no action being taken. That's when they go to that. So we need to get it right at the first. So I think that needs feeding back, that it's probably more district areas, isn't it, that we have that they're not responding. Don't get response from ASB, and the police don't respond, the council don't respond, and that's when you get the ASB reviews. But aside from that, do we have the capacity? Because it takes a lot of capacity to do the ASB reviews. So if there is going to be increase, do we have the capacity across the districts to do these?
Probably not. So a couple of districts, and I think it was a city, came to the team to look at how we could support them to undertake these reviews with a view to an officer. We approached the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner to support, and their response was to cut funding from each district, community safety partnership, and the city and the police to fund an officer. To which the community safety partnerships didn't agree to that. So we're back to the same position. So we are continuing to look at that through the ASB strategy group and the delivery group. But you're right, it is going to be a real challenge.
Thank you. If there's Mrs. Knight.
Thank you. We focus a lot on preventing that. I'd like to bring up the domestic abuse cases, 110,000 roughly. On page 170, if you ignore those who are unsure what gender they are, we've got 3/4 that are female over the past 3 years, 4 years, and 1/4 that are male, whether they be under 18, etc. So being female, that's a lot of ladies out there who are getting knocked about a bit. On 171, and we've got a lot of percentages highlighted bold, but what I see is the highest percentage, 3/4, is female, and across the 3 years you've put white British is the most prevalent group with approximately 1/4. It's 3/4, so I think that needs to be corrected. And I just find that shocking, absolutely shocking. That's it, thank you.
Did you want to come back? I suppose domestic abuse comes in all shapes, and so it's not necessarily just getting knocked about, and there's a lot of children that have domestic abuse on their parents or carers and stuff, so financial and coercive behaviour and all that sort of thing. So there is a wide range, isn't there? But I don't know if there's anything. This was done in 2024, wasn't it? End of 2024. So I don't know if you want to.
I think we do know that prevalence of victims are female. We do know it's an area where people don't report. It's like hate crime. People don't feel confident to report. So coming back to the strategy, there's going to be a big piece of work around awareness raising and communication. One of the survivors I spoke to was a man, and he spoke very much about not being believed, being re-traumatized every time, because whenever he presented anywhere, they assumed he was a perpetrator there to talk about his case. And he had to say, no, I'm the victim. So there are probably more men than that, but they're just not coming forward. So it's about building confidence for other communities to come forward and report.
Okay, thank you, Bemba. So the Commission's asked to note the annual update and comment on the domestic abuse reduction strategy, and that will be considered by the Cabinet in July. So the comments we've made today will be fed back to the Cabinet. Date of the next meeting. Next meeting, the Commission schedule to take place on the 11th of May, 2026. And item 14, as I said, there's no urgent items for us to declare. So I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much for your time this morning.